If you're enjoying this video, smash that like button, subscribe, and hit the bell. Share it with your friends and let me know in the comments where you're watching from. Every like and subscribe helps the channel grow. My name is Howard Mercer. I've been a park ranger at Glacier National Park for 25 years now. People say I'm as much a part of these mountains as the rocks and trees themselves. Maybe they're right. This morning started like any other. I woke up before sunrise, made my coffee strong and black, and saddled up Thunder, my loyal horse. There's something magical about these mountains at dawn, the way the first light hits Shadow Peak and spreads across the valleys. This place gave me peace when I came back from Korea with nightmares that wouldn't stop and a left hand that wasn't there anymore. The metal replacement works fine, though sometimes it aches when storms are coming. Like my memories, I guess. As Thunder carried me up the familiar trail, something felt off. The usual morning sounds were missing. No birds singing, no squirrels rushing through the underbrush. Just the sound of Thunder's hooves on the dirt path and my own breathing. "What's got you so quiet today?" I whispered to the forest, touching the gold wedding ring hanging from the chain around my neck. It was Maria's. Cancer took her 2 years ago. Sometimes I still talk to her, especially when things don't feel right. The fog below wasn't acting normal either. It moved wrong, like it had a mind of its own, swirling against the wind instead of with it. In all my years in these mountains, I'd never seen anything like it. Thunder sensed it too. His ears kept twitching nervously, and he snorted more than usual. Thunder isn't easily spooked. We've faced grizzlies together, but something had him on edge today. "Easy, boy," I said, patting his neck. "Just a strange morning." That's when I noticed the trees. Several pines along the trail had perfect round holes in them, as if someone had used a giant drill. Clear, sticky fluid oozed out of them. Not sap, something else. I touched it with my good hand. It was cold and thick, like gelatin. I reached for my radio to call it in. "Base, this is Mercer. I'm on the North Trail near Shadow Peak. Got some strange tree damage up here. Over." Instead of Jenny's voice from the ranger station, I got static, then a series of clicks. Click, click, click. Pause. Click, click, like some kind of code. "Base, do you copy?" Over. More clicking, then silence. Something was definitely wrong. The radio had been working fine when I checked it this morning. A sudden cold snap hit me, making me shiver. My breath came out in clouds, and frost started forming on Thunder's dark mane. In the middle of July. Impossible. I guided Thunder into a meadow I knew well, a spot where elk usually grazed in the mornings. What I found stopped me cold. The entire meadow had strange circular patterns pressed into the grass, perfect circles. Within circles, like something huge had landed there. My fingers went to Maria's ring again. "What am I looking at here, honey?" I whispered. The next stop on my route was the main watering hole, a small lake where animals gathered each morning. It should have been busy with life. Instead, I found death. Several deer and elk lay scattered around the water's edge, half-eaten, but not by any predator I knew. Each carcass was missing the same parts, like someone had surgically removed specific organs. Thunder refused to go closer, no matter how much I urged him. That's when I felt eyes on me. Looking up at the ridge, I saw them. 3 tall, impossibly thin figures standing against the sky. Even from this distance, I could tell they weren't human. They moved in perfect unison, stepping back into the trees like they were one creature instead of 3. My hand went to my service revolver, more out of instinct than any belief it would help. The scars on my face from that grisly attack, 10 years ago, suddenly itched. The bear had nearly killed me, but I understood it. Whatever was watching me from that ridge, I had a feeling I wouldn't understand it at all. I've seen a lot in my time, both in war and in these mountains. I've mapped more of this park than anyone alive. I know every trail, every cave, every danger spot. But my gut was telling me I was facing something entirely new. My superiors want me to retire, say I'm getting too old for this job. But the park needs me, especially now. For the past few months, I've been filling my journal with strange sightings and odd animal behaviors around Shadow Peak. Michael O'Brien, the only ranger I'd call a friend, thinks I'm becoming obsessed. Maybe he's right. But as I stood there watching that unnatural fog crawl up the mountainside toward me, I knew one thing for certain. Something terrible had come to my mountains, and I was the only one who could stop it. I needed to see what was happening up closer to Shadow Peak. But Thunder had other ideas. We reached the trail that leads to the upper ridge, a path we'd taken hundreds of times before, and Thunder stopped dead. His ears pinned back flat against his head. He made a sound I'd never heard from him before, something between a whimper and a neigh. Come on, boy," I said, trying to sound calmer than I felt. "We've been this way plenty of times." Thunder wouldn't budge. When I tried to nudge him forward, he reared up, nearly throwing me off. His eyes were wild with fear. All right, I said, patting his neck. "You win." I climbed down and removed my pack from the saddle. "Head back to the stables. I'll manage on foot." Thunder didn't need to be told twice. He turned and trotted away, faster than I'd ever seen him move. That scared me more than anything so far. Thunder had never abandoned me before. I checked my compass to make sure I was heading in the right direction. The needle spun wildly, around and around without stopping. I tapped the glass, but it kept spinning like a broken toy. Then I noticed my watch had stopped too. The hands were frozen. At 10:37, though the sun told me it was at least 1 in the afternoon. "Just great," I muttered, slipping the useless compass back into my pocket. The air changed as I walked higher up the trail. It started to smell like the air after a lightning strike, sharp and metallic. My mouth filled with a coppery taste, and the fillings in my back teeth began to ache. I found the hiker's backpack about half a mile up. It was hanging from a branch 20 feet above the ground. No way a bear or mountain lion could have put it there. The fabric was torn to shreds and covered in strange blue stains that seemed to move a little when I stared at them. I poked one of the stains with a stick, and the blue stuff shifted away from the touch like it was alive. I've been in these woods my whole adult life. I've seen bears, cougars, wolverines. I've survived blizzards and forest fires. But nothing in my experience could explain what I was seeing. That's when I spotted the footprints. They looked almost human, but wrong. Each print was about 20 inches long, bigger than any man's foot I'd ever seen, and they only had 3 toes. The prints sank deep into the hard ground, like whatever made them weighed hundreds of pounds. I followed the tracks, noting how they moved in a straight line. No wandering, no hesitation. Whatever made these knew exactly where it was going. As I walked, I noticed the shadows around me weren't behaving normally. The shadow of a pine tree stretched toward me, even though the sun was behind it. My own shadow sometimes moved a split second before I did, like it was leading me rather than following. "Pull yourself together, Howard," I said out loud. Hearing my own voice helped a little. Around the next bend, I found the research camp. The university sent scientists up here every summer to study plant life. There should have been at least 4 people there. The camp was empty, but it looked like everyone had just stepped away for a minute. Coffee mugs still had warm liquid in them. A laptop was open, the screen showing rows of numbers. A voice recorder sat on a folding table, its red light blinking. I pressed play. At first there were normal sounds, people talking about plant samples and weather readings. Then silence, then a high-pitched tone that got louder and higher until I had to shut it off. "Hello?" I called out. "Park Ranger, anyone here?" Nothing, not even an echo. I was writing in my notebook when I heard the wolves, a whole pack of them, burst from the trees, running past me so fast they were just a blur of fur. Wolves don't scare easily, and they certainly don't run from humans. But these wolves weren't running from me. They were running from something else. As they passed, I noticed things wrong with them. One had legs too long for its body. Another had what looked like a split jaw with 2 sets of teeth. A third had something I can't explain. Extra eyes growing on its side, blinking and looking around wildly. I wanted to believe I was seeing things, that maybe I'd hit my head or eaten something bad. But I knew what I saw. The trees started leaking then, not sap, but a thick amber liquid that hardened quickly in the air. The hardened drops formed little bubbles that trapped whatever was nearby, mostly bugs and small animals. I broke one open and found a perfectly preserved chipmunk inside. Its body twisted like it had died in pain. I backed away, wanting to run, but knowing I needed to figure out what was happening. Lives could be at stake. Michael might be up here somewhere too, checking on the researchers. The strangest thing, scarier than the footprints or the wolves or even the amber bubbles, was what happened to my shadow. It detached from me. I moved right. It moved left. I raised my arm. My shadow raised its leg. When I stood perfectly still, my shadow swayed slightly, like it was breathing on its own. I touched Maria's ring again. "I could use some of your strength right about now," I whispered. That's when I heard Michael's voice crackling through my radio. Howard, for God's sake, if you can hear me, run! They're not from here, Howard. His voice cut off in a scream that made my blood freeze. I grabbed the radio, pressing it close to my mouth. "Michael, where are you, Michael?" No answer, just static. Then that clicking sound again, and then I realized the clicking wasn't coming from the radio anymore. It was coming from right behind. Me? I turned around slowly, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. They stood at the edge of the small clearing. 3 of them, just like I'd seen on the ridge. But up close, they were much worse. They were tall, maybe 7 feet or more, with bodies so thin they looked like they might snap in a strong wind. Their skin was grey and almost see-through, like dirty ice. I could make out dark shapes moving under their skin, like shadows of organs that weren't quite right. Their heads were too big for their bodies, round and bald, with huge black eyes that took up most of their faces. No noses, just small slits. Their mouths were tiny lines that didn't move when they made their clicking sounds. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. In my 30 years dealing with wild animals and dangerous people, I'd never felt fear like this. They didn't walk toward me. They sort of glided. Sometimes they would be in one spot, then suddenly in another without seeming to cross the space between. It hurt my eyes to watch them move. My radio crackled again. This time, I heard Michael's voice clearly. "Howard, they've got me! North Ridge Cave System! For God's sake!" I lifted the radio to respond, but stopped when I saw all 3 creatures tilt their heads at exactly the same time, like dogs hearing a strange sound. Then one of them spoke, with Michael's voice, perfect in every way. "Howard, they've got me! North Ridge Cave System, for God's sake!" I nearly dropped the radio. "Michael," I whispered, though I knew it wasn't him. The creatures tilted their heads the other way, all together like they shared one mind. Then their skin began to light up from within. Patterns of light moved under their grey skin, forming shapes I couldn't quite look at directly. When I tried to focus on the patterns, my vision blurred and my head pounded. The 3 of them seemed to be talking to each other with these light patterns. No sounds, just pulsing lights under their skin. One of them moved toward a small stream that ran through the clearing. It reached down with 3 long, bony fingers and touched the water. Water immediately began to boil and steam. In seconds, the stream dried up completely, leaving behind a black crystal-like trail where water had been flowing just moments before. My hand moved to my gun. It was a pointless gesture. What would bullets do against whatever these things were? But training takes over when you're scared. Before I could even pull my revolver from its holster, the nearest creature reached out its arm. The arm stretched impossibly long, crossing the 15 feet between us in an instant. long, skinny fingers wrapped around the barrel of my gun. A burning cold shot through the metal. When I tried to pull the gun free, the barrel shattered like glass in my hand, pieces tinkling to the ground. The temperature around us dropped again. I could see my breath, and frost formed on the ground at my feet. The creature's skin began to glow with blue-white light, getting brighter as the air got colder. The trees and grass around us started to freeze, turning white with frost. When the wind blew, frozen leaves shattered like thin glass. Then I felt something push into my mind. I've never had anyone inside my head before, and I hope I never do again. Images flooded my brain. Stars and planets I didn't recognize, giant machines bigger than mountains, and thousands of creatures like these three, moving through a world of darkness. I fell to my knees holding my head. It was too much. Like someone was pouring their entire world directly into my brain. When I managed to look up again, I saw the area around us changing. Rocks lifted off the ground, floating in the air. Trees twisted into spiral shapes. The very air seemed to bend and warp, like I was seeing everything through warped glass. What happened next was the strangest thing of all. When I thought about Maria, about the day we met at the county fair, her blue dress, the way she laughed, her face appeared in the bark of a nearby tree, just for a second, then it melted away. When I thought about my old dog Blue, I heard a bark, and for a moment I saw his shadow on the ground beside mine. Whatever these visitors were doing, they were somehow connecting to my thoughts, pulling them out and making them real. If only for moments, I knew I had to get away, had to find help, or at least warn someone. The old mining tunnels ran through this part of the mountain. Abandoned in the 1930s, they were dangerous and off-limits to hikers, but I knew them well. And I remembered something from my grandfather, who had worked in those mines. The northern tunnels were rich with iron ore. He told me stories of how compasses went crazy down there, how watches stopped working, just like my compass and watch had stopped working near these creatures. Maybe, just maybe, the iron would affect them too. I looked around, trying to figure out which way to run. The creatures were slowly surrounding me, moving in that jerky, impossible way. Then I remembered Michael had mentioned the North Ridge cave system in his call. If that was really him and not these things tricking me, he might be there. And even if it was a trick, the North Caves connected to the old mine system. I took a deep breath, then ran for it, not looking back, not checking to see if they followed, just running as fast as my old legs would carry me. Behind me, I heard that clicking sound again, faster now. Excited or angry, I couldn't tell. All I knew was that I was being hunted by something not from this world, and my only hope was to go underground, into the darkness where these things might have already taken my only friend. I found the old mine, entrance half hidden behind a rockfall. The wooden support beams were rotting, and a sign reading, "Danger, keep out," hung crookedly by one nail. Any other day I'd never go in there. Today it looked like my only hope. I squeezed through the gap and entered the cool darkness. The smell hit me right away, damp earth, old wood, and something else, something wrong, like meat left too long, in the sun. I clicked on my flashlight, grateful it still worked when so many other things had failed. The beam cut through the dusty air, showing a tunnel that sloped down into the mountain. Rusty rails from the old mining carts ran along the floor, disappearing into the blackness ahead. I moved as quickly as I dared. These tunnels were dangerous. Cave-ins had killed miners back in the day. But what was behind me was worse. The tunnel opened into a larger chamber where the miners had dug out a big section of ore. My light caught something reflective on the walls, not metal, but something shiny and wet. I moved closer, and my blood went cold. Cocoons, dozens of them stuck to the walls and ceiling, each one about the size of a person, made of that same clear, jelly-like stuff I'd seen oozing from the trees. And inside each one, people, hikers from the looks of their clothes, the research team probably, all of them hanging there, suspended in the clear goo. Some were clearly dead, cut open like specimens in a lab. Their organs had been removed and replaced with the same crystalline structures I'd seen where the stream had been dried up. Others were still alive. Their eyes moved, following my light. Their mouths open in silent screams. I gagged, covering my mouth to keep from throwing up. Nothing in war or wilderness had prepared me for this. Then I saw him. Michael, my friend. He was in a cocoon near the back of the chamber, his chest cut open like the others. Blue crystal structures grew through his body, pulsing with faint light. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. "Oh God, Michael," I whispered. "I'm so sorry." A clicking sound echoed from the tunnel behind me. They were coming. I had to keep moving. There was nothing I could do for Michael or the others now, but I could make sure these things didn't do this to anyone else. I hurried through a connecting passage into another tunnel. This one sloped even deeper into the mountain. The air got colder, and the iron smell stronger. Good. I was heading into the heart of the old iron deposits. The beam of my flashlight started to flicker. The visitors were getting closer, their presence messing with anything electrical. Just as my light died completely, I heard them enter the tunnel behind me. Their movements made scraping sounds against the rock walls, and that clicking noise got louder. I felt my way forward in the pitch blackness. One hand on the rough wall, I knew I had the advantage here. These were my mountains, my tunnels. I'd studied the old mining maps. They hadn't. My foot kicked something that clinked against the stone floor. I bent down and felt around. A miner's helmet with the lamp still attached, and next to it, a canvas bag. I opened it and felt inside. Dynamite. Old sticks of it. From when they'd last worked this mine. Dangerous, unstable after all these years, but right now, a gift. I heard a strange stretching sound behind me. In my mind, I could picture those creatures squeezing their impossible bodies through the narrow tunnels, bending in ways nothing should bend. My fingers found a box of matches in the bag too. I struck one against the rough wall, and in the sudden small light, I saw I'd reached a junction. One tunnel continued deeper, while another branched off to the left. I remembered the maps. The left tunnel led to an underground lake where the miners had found a rich iron vein. The main tunnel eventually led back up to another exit. The match burned my fingers, and darkness fell again. I heard the visitors getting closer. I fumbled with the old helmet lamp, managed to get it working. Its weak yellow light was barely better than nothing, but it was enough to see the junction clearly. I took out 3 sticks of dynamite, struck another match, and lit the long fuses. Then I tossed them down the main tunnel toward the approaching creatures. "Chew on that," I muttered, then ran down the left passage toward the underground lake. The explosion shook the whole mountain. Dust and small rocks rained down from the ceiling. I heard the main tunnel collapse behind me with a thunder of falling rock. That would slow them down, at least. I kept moving, the helmet lamp bobbing in the darkness. The tunnel widened, and soon I felt a cool breeze on my face. The air smelled fresher with a hint of water. The tunnel opened into an enormous cavern. My small light couldn't reach the distant walls or ceiling, but it caught the surface of black water stretching out. Before me, the underground lake. What I saw in that lake made me forget to breathe. The surface wasn't still. Things moved beneath it. And in the center of the lake, rising from the water like some impossible building, was a structure. Perfectly geometric, made of the same crystal material I'd seen before. It pulsed with blue-white light, casting eerie shadows around the cavern, and around it more of the visitors, dozens of them working on the structure, moving in that same perfect unison. Some floated above the water. Others stood on impossible thin legs right on the surface without sinking. I ducked back, hoping they hadn't seen me. But as I turned to find another way out, my prosthetic hand knocked against the rock wall with a metallic clang. Every one of those creatures stopped moving at once. Every black eye turned toward me. I knew I had seconds, maybe less. I fumbled in the canvas bag, found 2 more sticks of dynamite. But what good would they do against so many? Then I remembered what my doctor had told me years ago after they fitted me with the prosthetic hand after Korea. There's quite a bit of metal in there, Howard. Surgical steel plates connecting to the bone might set off metal detectors. I looked at the crystal structure in the lake. Whatever it was important to them. And if they were affected by iron ore... I took a deep breath, said a quick prayer, and did something painful but necessary. I twisted and pulled at my prosthetic, and until the straps came loose and the metal and plastic device came off my arm. I lit the fuse on the last dynamite sticks, jammed them into the empty cavity of the prosthetic, and with all my strength threw it toward the center of the crystal structure. The visitors screamed, a high, piercing sound that made my ears bleed. They rushed toward the falling prosthetic, trying to stop it. Too late. The explosion was like nothing I'd ever seen. Not just fire and smoke, but light, blindingly bright blue-white light that shot up from the crystal structure. Ice crystals formed in the air, then shattered. Electrical bolts arced between the walls of the cavern. The whole mountain seemed to shake itself apart. Huge chunks of rock crashed down from the ceiling. The crystal structure cracked, then shattered with a sound like 1,000 windows breaking at once. I turned and ran, stumbling back up the tunnel as fast as I could. Behind me, inhuman screams and the roar of collapsing rock. I don't remember much of the next part, just running, falling, crawling, the tunnels collapsing around me. At some point, a falling rock pinned my leg. The pain was bad, but the fear was worse. Fear of being trapped there in the dark with those things, if any survived. Somehow I dragged myself out, my leg trailing behind me, using just my one good arm and pure stubbornness. I emerged into daylight, just as the mine entrance collapsed completely behind me. Park Search and Rescue found me 2 days later, half dead from blood loss and exposure. They said I was delirious, babbling about monsters and underground lakes. No one believed me. Why would they? The official report said a minor earthquake caused the cave-ins. They listed Michael and the research team as missing, presumed dead in the collapse. They never found the bodies, never will. That was 2 weeks ago. I'm in the hospital now. My leg's in a cast, and the doctors say I'll walk with a cane from now on. Could be worse. They think I suffered a head injury. Maybe breathe some bad air in the caves. They smile and nod when I try to tell them what really happened. They've scheduled me for a psychiatric evaluation next week. I pretend to agree with them now, easier that way. But I know what I saw, and I know it's not over. This morning, the nurse brought me a glass of water. As I watched, the water in the glass formed the same geometric patterns I'd seen in that crystal structure under the lake. Just for a second, then it was normal water again. And my shadow, it still moves before I do. Just a fraction of a second. Early, but enough that I notice. I don't think I destroyed them all. And I don't think they were just visitors passing through. I think they were scouts. The first wave. And I think they're still watching me from Shadow Peak, waiting for their chance to finish what they started. I've asked the nurse for a notebook. I'm writing everything down, everything I remember. Someone needs to know. Someone needs to be ready, because they'll be back, and next time I won't be there to stop them. My name is Eleanor Reed, and I've been a park ranger in the Great Smoky Mountains for just over a year now. Most people are surprised when they meet me. Not many women become rangers, especially back in 1963. But these mountains are in my blood. They always have been. The soft autumn rain fell around me as I made my way through the forest. I loved how the red and gold leaves made a colorful carpet under my boots. The weather report said it would clear up by afternoon, but I didn't mind. The gentle patter on my hat. It was peaceful, or at least it should have been. I stopped to write in my notebook about some strange red mushrooms I'd found. They were growing in perfect circles around certain trees, not something I'd ever seen before. As I knelt there, I suddenly realized something was missing. The forest was silent. No birds singing, no insects buzzing, nothing. In all my years hiking these mountains, I'd never experienced such complete quiet. It made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Just a weather change, I said out loud, trying to convince myself. The sound of my voice seemed to disappear into the mist that hung between the trees like ghostly fingers. I packed up my notebook and continued deeper into Weeping Widow Hollow. No one at the ranger station wanted this assignment. My boss, Superintendent Thornton, had practically forced it on me because none of the men would take it. "Let the woman handle it," I'd overheard him say. "Not like she's got family waiting at home." That stung, but he wasn't wrong. My husband Tom had left me last year. "I married a wife, not a forest," he'd said during our last fight. He couldn't understand why I'd choose trees and dirt over babies and dinner parties. But he never understood me, not really. The trees around me seemed to lean in as I walked, making the path feel smaller. The branches overhead formed a thick roof that blocked what little light made it through the clouds. I've never been afraid of the forest, but something about this hollow felt wrong. I came to a small brook and knelt down to fill my canteen. The water didn't look right. It was darker than it should be, almost thick. Floating on top were several small fish, all dead, their bodies twisted in unnatural ways. I pulled my hand back without touching the water. A sharp, rotten smell hit my nose, like old vegetables mixed with something metallic. It made my eyes water and caught in my throat when I tried to breathe. I stood up, and that's when I noticed. The trees, several of them had deep marks carved into their trunks, about 6 feet up. Not bare scratches. These were too precise, too deliberate. They formed patterns I didn't recognize, but something about them seemed familiar, like I'd seen them in a dream once. I thought about my grandfather then. He was Cherokee, a medicine man who taught me things the ranger training manual never mentioned. He told me the mountains had spirits, that certain places held power, both good and bad. As a kid, I'd believed him completely. As an adult, with a science degree, I tried to find logical explanations, but standing there, looking at those carvings, his voice echoed in my mind. "Some hollows are hungry, Eleanor. They've tasted blood and want more." I touched the small medicine pouch hanging around my neck. Inside were sacred herbs and my grandfather's carved bear tooth. I never took it off, not even to shower. The other rangers teased me about my good luck charm, but they didn't know what it really was. Protection. I realized I'd need to hike deeper into the hollow. My jeep had stalled at the entrance, engine just dying without explanation. The radio wasn't working either. I was on my own until I finished my survey or hiked back out. As the day grew darker, I pulled out my flashlight. That's when I noticed something strange about the shadows. When I shined my light directly on certain dark patches between trees, they didn't disappear like shadows should. Instead, they seemed to get deeper, like holes in the world. Some even seemed to pulse slightly, as if breathing. The rain stopped suddenly, though I could still hear it falling in the distance. I looked up through a break in the trees and saw a perfect circle of clear sky directly above me, while clouds continued to dump water everywhere else. It was like the hollow had its own weather, its own rules. I pulled out my map, trying to get my bearings. This area was supposedly well charted, but what I saw on the paper didn't match what was in front of me. Paths that should have been there weren't. And there, deep in the center of the hollow, was a mark I'd never seen before, a tiny settlement labeled Hunger's Rest. I checked 3 different maps. None of them had shown that settlement yesterday. Something rustled in the bushes behind me. I spun around, hand automatically going to the pistol on my hip. Nothing was there, but I could have sworn I heard children laughing, singing some old song I couldn't quite make out. "Hello?" I called. "Park Ranger! Is anyone there?" No answer came back, but as the echo of my voice faded, I heard it. A soft sing-song voice, the words becoming clearer. "The hollow walker feeds at night on those who stray from paths of light." First, your will, then your soul, until the hunger takes control. A child's rhyme, but not one I'd ever heard before. And there were no children registered as camping in this area. The last family to come through was the Millers, Mom, Dad, and little girl, reported missing 2 weeks ago after they never returned to their cabin. As darkness fell completely, I knew I should make camp. But something deep inside told me I shouldn't sleep in this hollow, not if I wanted to wake up again. I clutched my medicine pouch tighter and tried to remember everything my grandfather had taught me about the spirits that walked these ancient mountains. I had a feeling I was going to need that knowledge before this night was through, because something was watching me from between the trees. I couldn't see it yet, but I could feel it, patient, ancient, and so very hungry. The deeper I walked into the hollow, the more my skin prickled with that feeling you get when someone's watching you. I kept looking over my shoulder, but there was only mist and trees. I found the first dead deer just as the last bit of daylight faded. It was lying on its side, looking almost peaceful, like it had just laid down for a nap. But when I got closer, I saw that something was wrong. Its belly had been cut open and all the insides were missing. Not torn out like an animal attack, just gone. Clean, 20 feet away, I found another deer. Same thing, no insides, no blood around it. Then another and another. 5 deer in total, all lined up perfectly, all pointing toward the center of the hollow like arrows. No animal I knew hunted like this. I pulled out my compass to check which way I was headed, but the needle just spun around and around, never stopping. I looked back at my maps, those strange maps that now showed a town that shouldn't exist. I should have turned back right then. Any sensible person would have. But the Millers were still missing, and if they were out here, they needed help. That's what I told myself anyway. The truth was, something was pulling me forward, like a fish on a hook. The night got colder as I walked. My flashlight beam caught something ahead, a soft purple glow between the trees. I found an old metal lantern sitting on a rock, burning with a weird purple flame. The strange thing was, it looked ancient, all rusted and dented. Piles of old leaves had built up around it, years and years worth, like it had been sitting there burning for a very long time. But that wasn't possible. No lantern burns for years. Without fuel, I knelt down to look closer, and that's when I noticed the mushrooms around me starting to move, not being blown by wind. There wasn't any, but pulsing, like they were breathing. Little clouds of spores puffed out of them, but instead of floating down like normal, the spores hung in the air, then drifted all in the same direction, toward the center of the hollow. I stood up quick, and that's when I saw something move at the edge of my vision, tall and thin, slipping between trees. When I turned to look straight at it, there was nothing there, but in the soft ground I found footprints, deep marks that looked almost like hoofprints, but too big to be from any deer. My radio crackled suddenly, making me jump. Through the static, I heard a voice, my voice, sounding panicked. Can't outrun it, coming through the trees. Oh God, the children. They're not children anymore. I dropped the radio like it had burned me. That was impossible. I hadn't called for help, hadn't said those words, but it was definitely my voice. As I bent to pick up the radio, I noticed something on the trees around me. They were leaking sap and the thick amber stuff that dripped down the trunks, but where the sap touched the ground, it formed weird cocoon shapes. Inside one, I saw something moving, a small squirrel, still alive but trapped. The sap was slowly covering it completely while it was still alive, still aware. I had to look away. The trees seemed to close in around me as I pushed forward. I wasn't imagining it. The path behind me was disappearing, branches and trunks shifting position when I wasn't looking directly at them. The forest was changing around me, herding me forward like a sheep. My flashlight caught something ahead that made my heart stop. A campsite. There was a small tent, 3 folding chairs around a fire pit where embers still glowed red. 3 half-eaten plates of food sat on a portable table, like whoever was eating had just gotten up and walked away mid-bite. "Hello!" I called out. "Park service, anyone here?" The silence that followed seemed deeper than before. My voice didn't even echo. It was like the air just swallowed the sound. I walked closer to the campsite. It had to be the Millers. A pot of beans still hung over the now cold fire. I touched it. Stone cold, despite the embers still glowing. That didn't make sense. Something caught my eye. A small stuffed rabbit lying near the tent. I picked it up and my stomach turned when I saw it was soaked with blood. Fresh blood. My hands shook as I set the toy down. I pulled out the picture I had of the Miller family. Mom, Dad, and little 6-year-old Emily clutching. This exact same stuffed rabbit. I heard that soft singing again closer now. Children's voices, but wrong somehow, like the sound was coming from throats that weren't made for human speech. The Hollow Walker wears the skin of those who let the hunger in. First your flesh, then your face, until there's nothing left to trace. I spun around trying to find the source of the singing, when suddenly every instinct in my body screamed danger. The air got heavy and cold, like right before a storm hits. The fire embers went completely black all at once, plunging the campsite into darkness, except for my flashlight. And in that moment, my flashlight caught something moving between the trees ahead. Something tall and thin, with skin like bark and limbs too long to be human. It moved in a jerky way that hurt my eyes to look at, stopping and starting like broken film. Then it turned toward me, and I saw its face. Or what should have been a face. There was just a long vertical split running from what would be its forehead to its chin. The split widened slightly, and I caught the gleam of countless needle-like teeth inside. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. All I could do was stand there as it took one step forward, the ground beneath its feet turning black and dead. And then I remembered what Roy, the maintenance man back at the station, had told me before I left. If you see it, don't run. It likes the chase. Stand your ground, and whatever you do, don't let it touch your blood. I gripped my grandfather's medicine pouch tightly as the thing in the trees took another step toward me. I stood frozen as the creature took another step toward me. It was tall, at least 7 feet, with skin that looked like old tree bark, cracked and peeling in places. Its arms hung down past its knees, ending in long fingers that dragged along the ground. But what made my breath catch was its head, crowned with antlers like a deer, but they were growing and shrinking right before my eyes, making awful cracking sounds as they moved. I remembered my training. Make yourself big, make noise, show no fear. But this wasn't a bear or mountain lion. Whatever this thing was, it didn't belong in any ranger handbook. "Stay back," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I'm a park ranger. There are others who know I'm here." The creature tilted its head like it was curious. That terrible mouth, running from top to bottom instead of side to side, opened slightly, and a thick, dark liquid dripped out. The same stuff I'd seen in the brook. Where the drops hit the ground, the grass withered and died instantly. Took a step backward, and it copied me perfectly, taking a step back too. When I shifted my weight to one side, it did the same, like looking in a mirror. "What do you want?" I whispered. It had no eyes that I could see, but I felt it watching me, studying me. The longer we stood there, the more I could feel something, pushing against my mind, like fingers trying to pry open a door. Suddenly I heard voices all around me, whispers, snippets of conversations, a child crying. They seemed to be coming from the air itself, circling around the creature. "Me told you we shouldn't camp here. Mommy, the trees are moving. Just need to check it out. Then we'll go." The Millers. Those were their voices. I was hearing their last moments. I needed to move to get away. I took a careful step, to the side, and the creature did the same, mirroring me exactly. Then I had an idea. I raised my hand slowly, and it raised its hand too. I reached down to my belt, and it copied me. Then, as fast as I could, I grabbed my flashlight and threw it as far as I could to the right. The creature's head snapped toward the sound, and I ran, sprinting as hard as I could in the opposite direction. Behind me I heard a sound like tearing fabric and a high-pitched whine that made my teeth hurt. I crashed through the underbrush, not caring about the noise. Branches scratched my face, but I didn't slow down. I just needed to get out of the hollow, back to my jeep, back to safety. The ground sloped upward, and I felt a surge of hope. If I could get to higher ground, maybe I could orient myself, find a way out. As I crested the hill, I stopped dead. There, spread out before me, were the ruins of what must have been a small town. Old stone foundations, collapsed wooden buildings, a small church with half its roof missing. This had to be Hunger's Rest, the settlement that had appeared on my maps, but it was impossible. I'd hiked these mountains for years. There were no ruins marked on any official map, no record of any town being built this deep in the forest. I had no time to wonder about it because a movement caught my eye. The creature was there, standing between two ruined buildings. It hadn't chased me. Somehow, it had gotten ahead of me. I turned to run back the way I came, but there it was again, behind me too. Then I realized there were two of them. No, three. They were coming from between every building, every tree, all identical with their bark like skin and growing antlers. I backed up until I hit something solid, the wall of the old church. With nowhere else to go, I ducked inside the broken building. Maybe I could find something to use as a weapon or a place to hide. The inside of the church was mostly intact. Old wooden pews, a simple altar, and on the walls carvings. The same symbols I'd seen on the trees, but hundreds of them covering every surface. And at the front of the church was a large stone table, stained dark with what could only be blood. Something crunched under my boot. I looked down and saw bones, small bones, human bones, scattered across the floor. In the corner lay a pile of clothes, rotted and moldy but still recognizable as modern. A red jacket, jeans, hiking, boots, Miller, the clothes Mr. Miller had been wearing in the family photo. I heard a shuffling sound and spun around. There in the doorway stood the creature, just one now, blocking my only exit. Behind it, the forest had gone completely silent. It took a step into the church, and I noticed something I hadn't seen before. On its chest, partially hidden by the bark-like skin, was a park ranger badge. An old one from maybe 30 years ago. The thing that had once been a ranger tilted its head again, then opened its mouth wider than should be possible. The split in its face opened all the way up and down, revealing a throat lined with teeth, and deeper inside, things moving. Things that looked horribly like people, still squirming, still alive. I backed up against the altar, my hand touching something cold and metallic. An old box. I grabbed it and threw it hard at the creature. It hit with a dull thud, and the box broke open, spilling papers across the floor. The creature didn't even flinch. It just kept coming, step by slow step. I scrambled onto the altar, looking for another way out. There was a small window behind it, maybe big enough for me to squeeze through. As I turned to climb toward it, I cut my hand on a sharp piece of metal. Blood dripped onto the altar stone. The effect was immediate. The creature froze, then dropped to all fours, moving in a horrible scuttling rush toward the altar. It pressed its face against the stone, licking my blood with a tongue that was too long, too thin, too wrong. As it consumed my blood, a terrible change came over it. New antler points burst through its skull with sickening cracks. Its back arched, unnaturally, and that vertical mouth opened in what might have been pleasure or pain. I didn't stay to find out which. I lunged for the window, squeezing through the small opening as glass cut my arms and legs. I fell hard on the ground outside, the breath knocked out of me. When I could breathe again, I looked up at the night sky. Something was wrong with it. The stars were moving, swirling like they were being sucked into a whirlpool directly above the hollow. I forced myself to my feet and ran into the darkness, blood dripping from my cuts, fear giving me speed I didn't know I had. Behind me, I heard that awful cracking sound getting closer and closer and closer. I ran until my lungs burned. My cuts stung, and I knew I was leaving a trail of blood for the creature to follow. I needed a place to hide, to think. Ahead, I spotted a dark opening in the hillside, a cave. Without stopping to think if that was a good idea, I ducked inside. The cave was surprisingly deep, the walls covered with more of those strange symbols. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw that the back of the cave opened into a larger chamber. I should have been afraid to go deeper, but something pulled me forward. Maybe it was because I knew I couldn't outrun the creature. Maybe it was because I needed answers. Or maybe the hollow itself was pulling me in, like a spider drawing a fly into its web. The inner chamber was lit by a strange blue glow coming from clusters of crystals in the walls. The floor was smooth, like people had been walking on it for hundreds of years. In the center was a stone table similar to the one in the church, but smaller. Scattered around were personal items, a pocket watch, a hairbrush, a child's shoe. Decades of lost things from people who never made it out of the hollow. Against one wall was an old wooden chest. I opened it and found a leather-bound book, its pages yellow with age. The date inside read 1834. I flipped through it, reading by the light of the crystals. May 15th, 1834. Samuel has been talking with the Cherokee medicine man about spirits that can grant power. The old man warned him that some knowledge comes with a price. But Samuel won't listen. He says the spirit will make him strong enough to protect our settlement from the harsh winter ahead. May 20th, 1834. Samuel went alone into the hollow 3 days ago and hasn't returned. The men are organizing a search party for tomorrow. May 22, 1834. God help us. The thing that came back isn't Samuel anymore. It walks like him and talks like him, but its eyes are wrong. It's been whispering to the children at night. The entries continued, describing how Samuel convinced the settlers to perform rituals, sacrificing animals, and then eventually people to feed what they called a Wendigo spirit, an ancient hunger that possessed the medicine man and transformed him into the first Hollow Walker. The final entry was a desperate scrawl. It's taken everyone else. I'm the last. The children are changed. They sing to it now. If anyone finds this, burn the roots. The fungus connects it to everything in the hollow. Sacred fire is the only thing that can destroy it. May God forgive us for what we've done. As I read those last words, something caught my eye near the cave wall, a small pile of bones with tattered clothing still clinging to them. A child's red sneaker lay nearby, the kind popular about 20 years ago. I moved closer, and my heart stopped. Tied around the tiny wrist bone was a friendship bracelet, blue and green threads woven together with the name Tommy spelled out in beads. Tommy, my little brother. The memories flooded back. Camping with my family when I was 12, Tommy. Wandering off to chase a butterfly, the days of searching, the rangers telling us they'd done all they could. That was why I became a ranger. To make sure no one else went missing like Tommy did. But he'd been here all along. I sank to my knees, touching the bracelet I'd made for him for his 8th birthday. All these years, and I'd finally found him. Too late. A noise from the cave entrance snapped me back to reality. The Hollow Walker was coming. I could hear that awful cracking sound as it grew new antlers, could smell the rot and decay it brought with it. My hand clutched my medicine pouch. My grandfather's words came back to me. Sacred fire cleanses all evil, Ellie. Remember the 3 sacred woods and 7 blessed herbs. Remember how to call the fire that burns what doesn't belong in this world. Inside my pouch were the herbs my grandfather had given me: sage, sweetgrass, cedar, tobacco, birch bark, oak moss, and pine. Resin, the same things mentioned in the journal as protection against the Wendigo spirit. I worked quickly, gathering dead pine branches and the resinous wood my grandfather had taught me would burn even when wet. I arranged them in a circle around me, and Tommy's remains, then sprinkled the herbs from my pouch over them. The scratching at the cave entrance grew louder. I could see the Hollow Walker's shadow stretching across the floor, growing larger as it came closer. I struck a match and lit the pine resin first, whispering the Cherokee protection prayer my grandfather had taught me. The flame caught immediately, burning bright blue instead of orange. It spread quickly to the other wood, forming a complete circle of blue fire. Just as the circle closed, the Hollow Walker entered the chamber. It stopped at the edge of the firelight, its head tilting in that horrible, curious way. The vertical mouth opened slightly, making a sound like wind through dead leaves. "You took my brother," I said, my voice stronger than I felt. "You took all of them." The creature took a step toward the fire circle, then pulled back as the flames leapt higher. It seemed confused, afraid even. Then I remembered what the journal said: burn the roots. The Hollow Walker wasn't just the creature, it was connected to the entire hollow through the fungus and root systems. That's why the water was contaminated, why the animals were gone, why the plants moved in unnatural ways. I saw them now, thin white threads like roots running across the cave floor, connecting to the creature, pulsing with the same rhythm as its movements. The threads ran through cracks in the walls, spreading outward to the entire hollow. As I watched, the creature began to change. Its bark-like skin rippled, and for just a moment, I saw a human face push out from within, terrified, pleading. Before it was swallowed back into the monster, it wasn't just one person. The Hollow Walker was made of everyone it had consumed over the years, including my brother. They were all still in there, trapped and aware. The blue fire was keeping it back, but I knew the fire wouldn't last forever. I needed to do more. Making a decision I knew might cost me my life. I broke the circle, grabbing a burning branch. The creature lunged forward instantly, but I was ready. I jammed the burning branch into the mass of root-like threads on the floor. The effect was immediate and terrible. The threads blackened and withered, and a high-pitched scream filled the cave, so loud I had to cover my ears. The Hollow Walker thrashed and convulsed, its form shifting rapidly between human and monster. I didn't stop. I set fire to every root. I could see the blue flames spreading quickly along the threads and up the walls of the cave. The whole hollow would burn with this sacred fire, cleansing it of the ancient evil that had taken root here. The creature made one last, desperate lunge at me. One of its antlers caught my shoulder, piercing deep. The pain was blinding, but I twisted away and thrust my torch directly into its vertical mouth. Blue fire erupted from inside it, pouring from its eyes and mouth and ears. The cave shook with its dying screams as the fire consumed it from within. The last thing I remember before passing out was the look of peace that came over the faces briefly visible in its disintegrating body. The settlers, the lost hikers, the millers, my brother Tommy, all of them finally free. I woke up 3 days later in the Gatlinburg hospital. They told me search and rescue had found me half dead from blood loss at the edge of the hollow. A forest fire had broken out deep in the mountains, they said, but strangely it had burned in a perfect circle and then gone out on its own. No one mentioned the ruins of Hunger's Rest. No one talked about the Hollow Walker. And when I checked the maps later, there was no settlement marked in Weeping Widow Hollow. Sometimes I wonder if I imagined it all. But then I touched the scar on my shoulder, the wound that never quite healed right, and I know it was real. The doctors told me I was lucky to be alive, that the infection from my wound was like nothing they'd seen before. Sometimes, when I'm very tired, I catch myself staring at people a little too long, noticing the pulse in their necks, the blood flowing just beneath their skin. And sometimes, when I'm alone in the forest, I hear children singing that old rhyme about the hollow walker. I tell myself it's just the wind, just my imagination, but deep down I know the truth. The hollow is quiet now, but the hunger never really dies. It just finds a new home. My name is Vincent Markey, and I've been a park ranger in the Boundary Waters canoe area for almost 7 years now. Most people come here for a weekend or maybe a week of vacation. I live here year-round, and that's exactly how I like it. Today started like most summer days, me alone in my canoe on Serpent Lake, counting loons for my seasonal reports. The water was strange this morning, too still, like glass that hadn't been touched. Not a single ripple despite the light breeze rustling. Through the pine trees, I dipped my hand into the cool water, surprised by how clear it was. Usually, you can see maybe 20 feet down, but today I could make out the bottom nearly 40 feet below. What really caught my eye were these odd rock formations down there, perfect squares and triangles that looked man-made. That's not right. For this area, these lakes were carved by glaciers long ago, which don't leave tidy geometric shapes. A loon called out across the water, and something about it made the hair on my neck stand up. There it was again, and again, exactly the same call, like someone playing a recording on repeat, not a living bird changing its tune. Then everything went quiet. Dead quiet. The kind of silence that feels heavy and wrong in a forest. I was getting close to Blackfish Island, a small patch of land that most locals avoid. The Ojibwe guides who sometimes help tourists never camp there. They tell stories about the long ones who sleep beneath. I always figured it was just an old legend. My canoe suddenly felt like it was moving through honey instead of water. I had to push harder with my paddle, though the water looked normal when I touched it. When I finally got close enough to see the island clearly, something seemed off about it. Every tree was exactly the same height. The bushes were spaced like they'd been measured and planted. Nature isn't that precise. A thick fog appeared out of nowhere, surrounding my canoe. Strange blue flashes of light pulsed inside it, like silent lightning. Between the fog patches, I noticed weird ripples in the water forming perfect circles around my canoe, moving against the wind instead of with it. I finally reached the shore and pulled my canoe up onto the rocks. What I saw made me freeze. Hundreds of small fish were flopping on the shoreline, still alive. Fish don't beach themselves unless they're terrified of something in the water. I'm not someone who scares easily. After Vietnam, I thought I'd seen the worst the world had to offer. That's why I came here in the first place, to find peace in the quiet. My leg aches a bit as I think about it, the prosthetic below my left knee, a daily reminder of the landmine that sent me home. Most people don't even notice my slight limp anymore. I've worked hard to hide it. I pulled out my journal and started taking notes. Writing things down helps me make sense of them. Dad always said, I got that from him, that need to document everything. I ran my fingers over the worn copy of the Kalevala in my backpack, a book of Finnish poems about water spirits that he used to read to me as a kid. He'd highlighted so many passages, written notes in the margins about creatures that lived in the lakes of the old country. The scientific part of my brain, the part that knows every bird call and animal track in these woods, was telling me something wasn't right here. If Scout were with me, my old one-eyed Maine Coon cat, he'd be arching his back and hissing. For 7 years, that cat has joined me on every patrol, until 3 weeks ago when he suddenly refused to get in the canoe, hissing at the water like it was full of snakes. That was around the same time the nightmares started. Each night I'd dream about drowning in pitch-black water while something with too many arms pulled me down deeper. and every single night I'd wake up gasping for air at exactly 3:27 a.m. I haven't told anyone at headquarters about what I've been finding. The pattern of missing people, 17 canoeists over 70 years, all vanishing without a trace near this very island. I've mapped each disappearance, created a timeline, gathered what little evidence exists. All of it points here, to Blackfish Island, where I now stand alone with beached fish flopping at my feet and unnatural silence pressing against my ears. My radio crackled with static. No one would be looking for me until tomorrow at the earliest. I was on my own. I walked slowly along the shoreline, my boots crunching on the small rocks. That's when I noticed something strange, black crystal-like growths on some of the shore rocks. I bent down for a closer look. They weren't like any minerals I'd seen before in my years of ranger work. The weird thing was, they seemed to swallow the light instead of shining like normal crystals. When I touched one, I pulled my hand back quickly. It was warm, like it had been sitting in the sun all day, even though it was in the shade. I pulled out my compass to mark the location on my map, but the needle went crazy, spinning in fast circles. At the same time, I glanced at my watch and did a double take. The hands were moving backward, but still keeping perfect time, just in the wrong direction. I tapped the glass, turned the watch over, but it kept going backward. I walked about 50 feet away, and it started working normally again. What on earth? I muttered to myself, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet. As I moved deeper into the island, I found a metal box half buried in dirt near the base of a tree. It was old, but still sealed tight. Inside was a logbook from 1938, its pages yellow, but the handwriting still clear. I sat on a fallen log and started reading. The book belonged to another ranger named Thomas, who had noticed the same things I was seeing now. The still water, the strange formations, the silence. His final entry sent a chill down my spine. I'm certain now that something is waking beneath the island. The last page was dated June 17, 1938. According to my research, Thomas disappeared 3 days later. I snapped the book shut and stood up, suddenly feeling like I was being watched. That's when I noticed the shadows around me. They moved across the ground in human-like shapes, but there was nothing to cast them. One shadow seemed to copy my movements for a few seconds before melting away into the dappled light coming through the trees. My heart was beating faster now. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation, maybe gas from the lake bottom affecting my brain, strange light patterns from the water. I climbed to higher ground, wanting to get a better view of the island. From up there, I noticed something that couldn't be natural. Dozens of stone piles arranged in a perfect spiral pattern across a clearing. Each pile was carefully balanced, stone upon stone, not something random hikers would make. This took time and purpose. I pulled out my depth finder and pointed it toward the lake. According to my maps, Serpent Lake was about 110 feet at its deepest. Point. The finder beeped and displayed 412 feet. I moved to another spot and tried again, 389 feet. Another spot, 427 feet. The deep spots seemed to be moving. My throat felt dry. I took a sip from my canteen and spat it out immediately. The water tasted metallic, wrong somehow. I poured some onto a small metal carabiner clipped to my belt, and within seconds, rust started forming. This wasn't normal water anymore. The sun was starting to lower in the sky when I found the camera. It was newer model, just sitting on a rock near the shore, like someone had left in a hurry. The film was still inside. I rewound it and carefully removed it, making a mental note to develop it when I got back to my cabin. Just before sunset, I found the circle. It was a perfect circle, about 50 feet across, where nothing grew. Not a single plant or blade of grass, just fine black sand arranged in patterns. I scuffed some with my boot, and when I looked down a minute later, the sand had moved back into the same pattern, like someone had smoothed it over. But there was no one there but me. The sun finally set, and that's when the lake began to glow. Not all of it, just patches here and there, pulsing with a soft blue-green light. The pulses weren't random. They had a rhythm to them. One flash, pause. 2 flashes, pause. 3 flashes, pause. 5 flashes. I recognized the pattern from my communication training in Vietnam. Prime numbers, 1, 2, 3, 5. Something intelligent was creating those pulses. I backed away from the shore, realizing 3 things at once. Night had fallen completely, the temperature had dropped at least 20 degrees, and my flashlight was growing dimmer by the second. Worst of all, I could hear something large moving in the water near the shore. Something that shouldn't be there. Something that made the water bubble and shift in ways that defied everything I knew about lakes. I needed to find shelter for the night. Fast. I found a small cave opening on the island's eastern side and ducked inside. It wasn't deep, but it offered some protection from whatever was happening out there. I sat with my back against the rocky wall, flashlight pointed at the entrance, and tried to calm my breathing. That's when I heard it, a sound like wet cloth dragging over rocks. Getting closer, I clicked off my flashlight and held my breath. The cave entrance darkened as something massive moved past it. Water dripped from its surface, forming small puddles that gleamed in the faint moonlight, filtering through the trees. Curiosity got the better of me. I crawled to the cave mouth and peered out. What I saw made my blood run cold. Rising from the dark water was the biggest creature I had ever seen. At first I thought it was some kind of giant squid or octopus, but it was neither. Its body was black and shiny, like oil, with dozens of long arms or tentacles that moved. With purpose, not just drifting like a normal sea creature's would. Each tentacle ended in something like a hand, with fingers that could grab things. The middle part of its body was see-through in places, showing organs that glowed from within, pulsing with the same pattern I'd seen in the water. The prime numbers. But the strangest part was where its head should be. Instead of eyes or a mouth, there was a large crystal structure, exactly like the black crystals I'd found on the shore. It flashed occasionally with what looked like electricity, and each time it did, my flashlight flickered in my hand, even though it was turned off. The creature moved like it weighed nothing, gliding through the water and controlling the currents. Around it, it created whirlpools that revealed glimpses of stone structures deep below, walls, archways, and what looked like buildings. Not natural rock formations. These were made by someone or something. I should have been terrified. I was terrified, but the scientist in me couldn't look away. I needed to understand what I was seeing. Then I noticed the silence. Not just quiet, but complete absence of sound around the creature, like it was swallowing all noise. But inside my head, I started hearing strange, high-pitched tones that made my teeth hurt and my vision blur. The creature started herding fish in the water, making them swim in patterns that looked like letters or symbols. It was trying to make shapes, trying to communicate, or maybe just showing off that it could control them. I shifted position, and a small rock tumbled from the cave entrance, hitting a sharp stone below. I felt a sting as my hand got cut on. The cave wall. A few drops of my blood fell into a puddle near the entrance, washing slowly toward the lake. The reaction was immediate and terrifying. The moment my blood touched the water, all of the creature's tentacles whipped the surface into a wild foam. The crystal part of its body lit up bright, flashing faster than before. It knew I was there. Then I saw more disturbances in the water. Smaller versions of the same creature started rising up, some the size of dogs, others as big as cars. They were different from the big one, with varying numbers of tentacles, but clearly the same type of thing. A deer that had been drinking at the shoreline suddenly froze as one of the tentacles touched it. I watched in horror as the deer's body seemed to melt where the tentacle touched it, turning into a thick liquid that flowed up the tentacle and into the creature's main body. I pressed myself deeper into the cave shadow, heart pounding so loud. I was sure they could hear it. Then I saw something that made me realize hiding wasn't going to work. One of the smaller creatures pulled itself out of the water and onto the shore. Its skin seemed to leak a clear slime that covered its body, keeping it wet. It moved across the land with shocking speed, using its tentacles to pull itself forward, heading toward the far side of the island. They could leave the water. They could come looking for me. I stayed frozen in place, watching as the big creature directed the smaller ones. Like a mother with her children, they spread out across the lake and around the island's edges, searching. Night was fully upon me now. The only light came from the creature's glowing organs and occasional flashes from the crystal structures on their bodies. I had never felt so alone or so small in my life, not even in the darkest days of Vietnam. I knew I couldn't stay in this shallow cave until morning. They would find me here eventually. I needed a better plan, a better hiding place, and most of all, I needed to figure out how to get off this island. As quietly as possible, I gathered my few supplies and prepared to make a run for it. The main creature had moved to the far side of the island, but I could see the smaller ones patrolling the shoreline. I took a deep breath, clutched my knife in one hand and flashlight in the other, and stepped out of the cave into the moonlight. Ran through the darkness, keeping low and sticking to the shadows of the trees. My first thought was to get back to my canoe and paddle away as fast as possible. But when I reached the spot where I'd left it, my heart sank. The canoe was in pieces, the wood splintered and scattered across the rocks. Something had destroyed it deliberately. I was trapped on Blackfish Island with those creatures. My radio wasn't working, and no one would come looking for me until tomorrow at the earliest. I needed to find a safe place to hide until morning. As I moved along the shore, I spotted a dark opening in the rocks, too straight to be natural. It looked like a tunnel entrance, hidden behind some bushes. With no better options, I slipped inside. The tunnel opened into a cave system under the island. I switched on my flashlight, keeping the beam pointed low. The first thing I noticed were the drawings on the walls. Ancient paintings showing the same creatures I'd just seen. The images told a story. The creatures sleeping for long periods, then waking to feed, then returning to sleep. They weren't just animals. The pictures showed them building structures, arranging objects, studying smaller creatures. They were intelligent, and they'd been here for a very, very long time. Deeper in the cave, I found something that made my skin crawl. Careful displays of human items. Watches arranged by size. Wedding rings in a perfect circle. Camping gear sorted by color. Not scattered like they'd washed up here, but placed with purpose, like a museum collection. These were the belongings of the missing canoeists. I moved. Deeper, my flashlight beam catching something that gleamed in the darkness. The cave opened into a larger chamber that stretched under the lake itself. The ceiling was clear in spots, like windows looking up into the water, and hanging from the roof were hundreds of sacks, each one translucent and filled with fluid. Inside each sack was a small version of the creatures, curled up but clearly growing. This island was their nursery. I remembered my father's book, The Kalevala, with all his notes about Finnish water spirits. He had highlighted passages about how the old people used to trap these spirits, using certain materials and arrangements that the spirits couldn't cross or touch. I pulled the book from my pack, flipping through the pages until I found what I needed. Iron, silver, copper, mixed metals. The old story said water spirits couldn't stand them. I felt for my dog tags from Vietnam, made of a silver-copper alloy. I also had my metal canteen, my knife, and the small tools in my survival kit. Not much, but something. Just then I heard water rushing into the tunnel behind me. The creatures had found the entrance and were flooding the caves. I had to move, fast. I ran deeper into the cave system, looking for another way out. The water was rising quickly, already ankle-deep and getting higher. Up ahead, the passage split in two. I chose the right path, climbing upward. A smaller creature appeared, in front of me, pulling itself through a narrow opening. Its tentacles reached for me, but I slashed at them with my knife. Where the metal touched it, the creature's flesh sizzled and burned. The stories were true. I fought my way past it, but more were coming from different passages. I was being herded. Toward the center of the cave system, the water was waist-deep now. My prosthetic leg made it hard to move quickly through the rising flood. One of the juvenile creatures grabbed my ankle, pulling me down. Without thinking, I unstrapped my prosthetic leg and jabbed the metal end right into the crystal part of its body. The effect was immediate and unexpected. The creature let out a high-pitched sound that hurt my ears, and its crystal structure began to crack. Light poured out of the cracks, getting brighter until the creature simply fell apart. The light caused a chain reaction, affecting two other, smaller creatures nearby, which also began to crack and break. I grabbed my leg and kept moving, now understanding I had a weapon that worked. But I'd lost precious time. The water was chest-high, and I could sense the parent creature, the massive one I'd seen first, moving through the flooded tunnels toward me. Finally, I reached a chamber with a crack in the ceiling that led to the surface. I could see stars through it. It was narrow, but it might work. I started climbing, using my knife to dig handholds in the soft rock. Just as I was halfway up, the parent creature entered the chamber below. Its crystal structure pulsed with angry light, and its tentacles whipped around, searching for me. One. It caught my remaining good leg, and I felt that terrible melting sensation begin. In desperation, I took my dog tags and threw them directly at the crystal structure. They hit with a sound like shattering glass, and the creature recoiled enough for me to break free. I climbed through the crack and emerged on the highest point of the island, gasping for air. I could see the waters of Serpent Lake bubbling all around the island. Gas was rising from the depths. Methane, I realized, from the decaying matter at the bottom. The same thing I'd noticed earlier, creating small bubbles near certain areas of the lake. I remembered my emergency flare in my pack. If that gas was methane, and there was enough of it, the creature burst from the ground behind me, larger than ever, crystal structure now cracked but still glowing with power. Its tentacles surrounded me on all sides. I struck the flare and threw it as hard as I could toward the largest bubble of gas rising from the lake. The explosion was bigger than I could have imagined. The methane ignited in a chain reaction across the lake's surface. The shockwave knocked me flat. Fire spread across the water in an expanding circle. The creature screamed in my mind, a sound of rage and pain. The island began to shake and crumble. I felt it sinking beneath my feet as the tunnels collapsed. The creature retreated toward the water, its body smoking where the flames had touched it. I jumped from rock to rock as the island disintegrated, making it to a floating log just as the last piece of land disappeared beneath the waves. I clung to the log, kicking with my one good leg, pushing away from the center of the lake where the island had been. The last thing I saw was the creature's crystal structure sinking into the depths, still glowing but dimmer now, light fading as it descended into the new dark hole where Blackfish Island had stood. They found me 3 days later, delirious from exposure and dehydration, washed up on the north shore of Serpent Lake, still clutching my father's book. No one believed my story, of course. They said the island had been destroyed by a sudden release of underground gas, causing a sinkhole. The official report mentioned nothing about creatures or missing canoeists, but I know what I saw. I know what still lives down there, perhaps wounded, but not destroyed, waiting to heal, waiting to rise again. Before they took me to the hospital, I managed to seal my journal in a waterproof container and leave it where the current would carry it downstream. Someone would find it eventually. Someone would read it and know the truth. My name is Vincent Mackey, and this is my warning. Whatever sleeps beneath still waters, let it lie. Some things are not meant to be awakened. 6 months later, scientists conducting a sonar survey of Serpent Lake discovered a perfectly circular depression nearly 600 feet deep where Blackfish Island once stood. They called it an unexplained geological phenomenon. I call it something else. I call it a nest whose occupants will one day return, and I'll be waiting when they do. My name is Matthew Blackwood. I'm 47 years old, and I've been a park ranger for 20 years now. The last 5 years, I've been up here in Denali National Park, Alaska. Most folks would call it the middle of nowhere. I call it home. Today started like any other day. I got on my snowmobile at dawn to check the northern boundary of the park. Just me, my sled dogs, and miles of white as far as the eye can see. The mountains stood tall in the distance, with a few spruce trees dotting the landscape. But something felt off. It's been weirdly warm lately. Too warm for this time of year. The snow has melted in patches, showing the ground underneath. From up on the ridge, I noticed something strange, perfect circles in the ground, like someone had drawn them with a giant compass. They shouldn't be there. My dogs were acting weird too. Akiak, my lead dog, wouldn't stop whining. They all kept staring at a far-off ridge, like they saw something I couldn't. These dogs have saved my life more times than I can count. When they act scared, I pay attention. Then I saw it. The northern lights dancing across the sky, in broad daylight. That's not possible. At first I thought it was just light bouncing off ice crystals or something. But then the colors started making patterns, repeating over and over. Never seen anything like it in all my years up here. Above me, a bunch of ravens were flying in a perfect spiral. Ravens are noisy birds, always cawing and carrying on. But these ones were making clicking sounds, like the ticking of a clock. The sound carried through the still air, making the hair on my neck stand up. As I continued my patrol, I came across something that turned my blood cold. Animal bodies, foxes, rabbits, even a young moose, all laid out in a straight line pointing north. They weren't killed by wolves or bears. The cuts on them were clean, like someone used a scalpel. My equipment started going haywire. The compass needles spun like crazy. My radio only picked up static and what sounded like someone whispering numbers. My GPS kept jumping between where I actually was and some spot 20 miles north. In the fresh snow, I found footprints. Massive ones, about 4 feet long with 3 toes. No animal in Alaska makes tracks like that, and they just stopped, like whatever made them vanished into thin air. The plants were acting strange too. Patches of grass and moss were shaking. Even though there wasn't any wind, they moved in waves all pointing north, and the temperature was all over the place, -5 degrees in one spot, then -50 just a few steps away. You could see where the air froze solid, making little walls of ice crystals. I should probably tell you a bit about myself. I wasn't always alone up here. I had a family once, a wife and a little girl. They died in a house fire 5 years ago, while I was away on duty. That's why I came to Alaska. Couldn't bear to be around people after that. My face isn't much to look at these days. Got bad frostbite 3 years back when I rescued some climbers in a blizzard. Lost parts of my ears and nose. The cold up here doesn't forgive mistakes. The local Inuit people call me Isikangitsuk. It means he who listens to the land. They say I have a special connection to the wilderness. Maybe I do. I've always been able to sense things before. They happen out here. I carry a small wooden wolf figure in my pocket. My daughter carved it for me before she died. It's my good luck charm in this lonely place. Sleep doesn't come easy to me. Most nights I get 2, maybe 3 hours. The rest of the time I fix my gear or watch the northern lights and write down what I see in my journals. My only real friends are my 6 sled dogs. Raised them from pups. They know dozens of commands and would die for me if they had to. I'd do the same for them. I know how to survive up here better than most. Learned from books, training, and the Inuit elders who took a liking to me. They taught me things you won't find in any manual. People think I'm cold, emotionless. Truth is I'm always watching, always listening. Up here, one small mistake means you're dead. Can't afford to let my guard down. There's been weird stuff happening in my area for months now. Equipment breaking for no reason, animals acting strange, tracks that shouldn't exist. I haven't told my bosses. They'd pull me out, make me go back to civilization. I can't do that. There's one more thing I haven't told anyone. I've been seeing things. My wife and daughter walking across the snow. I only catch glimpses from the corner of my eye. They're always heading north, like they're trying to lead me somewhere. I know they're not real, but sometimes I want to follow them anyway, just to see where they take me. That's when the real trouble started. Little did I know that this was just the beginning of the nightmare. The next morning, I headed out to check on the research station about 15 miles north. The University of Alaska had sent 3 scientists there to study weather patterns. They were supposed to radio in every day, but no one had heard from them in 3 weeks. My boss asked me to see if they were okay. When I got there, the station looked empty. The door was unlocked, which was the first bad sign. In this cold, you always lock up tight or you freeze to death. I called out, but nobody answered. Inside, everything was neat and tidy, like they had just stepped out for a minute. Half-eaten meals sat on plates, now frozen solid. Their computers were still on, running on the backup generator. I found their notebooks open on the table. The last entry just stopped in the middle of a sentence. It said something about strange wind patterns and unknown particles in the air. Then, nothing. Like they just disappeared while writing. I whistled for Akiak to come inside and help me search. Instead, he started barking like crazy and digging at a spot in the snow outside. He's never acted like that before. I went to see what had him so worked up. What he found made my stomach turn. It was a human hand, cut clean at the wrist, perfectly preserved in the frozen ground. It should have been decayed or eaten by animals, but it looked fresh, like it had just been put there. The scientists had been missing for weeks. This wasn't right. Just then, the wind changed direction. The smell hit me like a punch to the gut, the worst rotting stench I've ever smelled. I threw up right there in the snow, but something was off about the smell. In my years in the wilderness, I've smelled all kinds of dead things. This was different. It had weird chemical notes to it, like nothing natural. My radio suddenly turned on by itself. Through the static, I heard voices. The missing scientists, talking about their findings. The timestamp on the transmission said it was happening right now, but that couldn't be possible. Looking around, I noticed something else strange. There were no birds anywhere near the station. Alaska has plenty of ravens, jays, and other scavengers. They should have been all over this place looking for food. Instead, they were circling high above, forming a perfect ring around the area, like they were afraid to come closer. I took out my binoculars and scanned the northern ridge. For just a second, I saw something. A tall, skinny figure walking on 2 legs. It wasn't a bear or a moose. It looked almost human, but wrong somehow. Too tall, too thin. Before I could get a better look, a sudden wall of snow blocked my view. When it cleared, seconds later, the figure was gone. My dogs started going crazy. They've never turned on each other before, but now they were fighting, snarling and biting. I had to pull them apart. That's when I noticed their eyes. They had a milky film over them, and black goop was dripping from their mouths. Something was very wrong with them. The sky darkened suddenly. The clouds were spinning, forming a circle with a clear spot in the middle, right above where I had seen the strange figure. It looked like a giant eye staring down at us. I went back to the snowmobile to radio for help. That's when I noticed my spare parts were different. The metal pieces felt warm, even, though it was 20 below zero. They had tiny holes all over, like sponges. When I touched one, I swear I felt it pulse, like it was breathing. The wind picked up again, cutting right through my heavy coat. Where it touched my skin, a rash appeared. Not random like normal rashes, but in perfect geometric patterns. The skin there went numb, and when I checked it with my UV flashlight, it glowed bright blue. I knew I should leave, get back to base, and report what I'd found. But I couldn't stop thinking about those scientists and what might have happened to them. And somewhere in the back of my mind, I heard my daughter's voice calling me to go north, just a little further north. The storm was getting worse. Snow whipped around me so hard, it stung my face. The temperature dropped even more. I needed to find shelter fast or I wouldn't make it through the night. But part of me didn't want to stay here, so close to the empty research station and whatever had happened to those poor people. I gathered my remaining dogs that weren't sick and loaded them on the sled. We had to move quickly before things got worse. Little did I know that what waited for us beyond that northern ridge would change everything I thought I knew about our world. The wind was howling as I made my way over the northern ridge. My remaining dogs were nervous, whimpering, and pulling at their harnesses. I couldn't blame them. Something felt wrong about this place. I stopped at the top of the ridge to catch my breath. That's when I saw it. It was tall, maybe 9 feet, and so skinny it looked like a shadow standing upright. Its skin was grayish, and I could almost see through it, like looking through dirty ice. The thing moved smoothly, even against the strong wind that was nearly knocking me over. I rubbed my eyes, thinking I was seeing things, but it was still there. Its arms and legs were too long, with no hands or feet, just points that sometimes split into what looked like fingers or tentacles. They moved with a strange precision, touching rocks and plants like it was studying them. The worst part was its face, or where a face should be. It was blank, with features that kept changing. 1 second I'd see eyes and a mouth, then they'd melt away and form somewhere else on its head, like it was trying to figure out how a face should look. Around it swirled a small storm of dust and tiny bits of something. With a sick feeling, I realized some of that dust might be what was left of the missing scientists. The weather around the thing was all wrong. Where it walked, tiny tornadoes formed and disappeared. In some spots, the air seemed to vanish completely, freeze-drying anything caught in it instantly. It moved across the deep snow but left no footprints. Instead, wherever it passed, the snow melted away to show dead plants underneath, preserved, like they'd been frozen for 1,000 years. Then it made a sound, not with a mouth, but somehow by vibrating the air itself. The noise drove into my ears like needles, making my head pound. With the pain came flashes in my mind, pictures of empty space between stars, and more things like this one, drifting through the darkness. I crouched down, trying to stay hidden behind a snowbank. Through my binoculars, I watched it move toward what was left of a moose carcass. It didn't eat the meat. Instead, it seemed to be studying it, pulling it apart and examining each piece before turning it to dust that joined the cloud around it. With horror, I realized this thing wasn't hunting for food. It was collecting samples, studying everything it found like some kind of alien scientist. Suddenly, a voice seemed to come from the swirling dust around it, one of the missing researchers calling for help. Then another voice. Then another, all talking over each other before fading back into the weird clicking sound of the wind. Night was falling fast, and as it got darker, the creature changed. Its skin became more see-through, and I could make out something like veins inside it, filled with glowing blue liquid. The glow pulsed in the same pattern as the strange northern lights above us. The thing turned suddenly and looked right at me. Or at least its shifting face pointed in my direction. I ducked down, but I had a feeling it knew exactly where I was. It started moving toward my hiding spot. I needed to get away fast, but as I turned to run, my foot slipped on the ice. I fell hard, and my radio clattered across the rocks. The creature stopped. It seemed interested in the radio. One of its tentacle fingers stretched out impossibly long and touched the radio dial. It turned the knob with perfect precision, scanning through frequencies like it knew exactly what it was doing. My breath froze in my throat. This thing wasn't just some animal. It was smart, maybe smarter than us. And it was curious about our technology. As the sun set completely, the glowing veins inside it grew brighter. I could see patterns flowing through them that matched the lights in the sky. Somehow, this thing was connected to the aurora. The temperature dropped even further. I needed shelter, and fast. My survival training kicked in. I knew there was an old hunting cabin about 2 miles back. If I could make it there, maybe I could figure out what to do next. Slowly, I backed away. The creature was still focused on my radio. I whistled softly to my remaining dogs. They came to me, trembling but obedient. Together, we slipped away into the gathering darkness. Behind us, the wind picked up, carrying that terrible rotting smell. It was following us. I could feel it, and somehow I knew it wasn't going to stop until it had added me to its collection. I made it to the old hunting cabin just as a massive storm hit. The wind screamed around the small wooden building, and the temperature dropped so fast. The windows frosted over in seconds. This wasn't a normal storm. It was that thing trying to get to me. Inside, the cabin was dusty but solid. I quickly blocked the door with a heavy table and stuffed old rags under the door and around the windows. My 3 remaining dogs huddled in the corner, whining softly. The wind outside got louder, pushing against the walls and testing every crack. It felt like the creature was circling the cabin, looking for a way in. The air pressure kept changing. My ears popped painfully as it rose and fell. Then came the smell, that awful rotting stench, seeping through tiny spaces in the walls. As I moved around the cabin looking for more things to block the gaps, I found a small wooden box tucked under a loose floorboard. Inside were old, yellowed papers covered in messy handwriting. Someone had been here before, someone who had seen the thing outside. The notes called it an atmospheric organism, an ancient creature that sleeps high up in the sky for decades, then comes down to collect samples of living things. It studies them, somehow keeps parts of their minds, then uses what it learns to make more of itself. Beside the papers was a book with strange symbols drawn on the cover. I recognized them. They were Inuit protection symbols, the same ones, carved on the wooden wolf figure my daughter had made for me. With a chill, I realized she must have copied them from an old book in our house. I looked closely at the walls and noticed the same symbols carved around the door frame and windows. That's why the creature was having trouble getting in, but it was already finding ways around the protection. The temperature inside the cabin plummeted. I could see my breath in thick clouds. One of my dogs, Coda, suddenly stood up. His eyes had that milky film again, and black goo dripped from his mouth. Before I could reach him, he charged at the door, clawing and biting at the wood. "Coda, stop!" I shouted. But it wasn't Coda anymore. The creature was controlling him, using him to get inside. The door splintered, cold wind and swirling particles rushed in. Coda collapsed, his body shriveling like all the moisture had been sucked out, leaving only a dry husk that crumbled to dust. The creature's tall form bent to fit through the doorway. Inside, it seemed even bigger, its body pulsing with that strange blue light. I backed away until I hit the wall. There was nowhere else to go. My ranger training kicked in. I noticed the creature seemed to pull back when it got near my kerosene lamp. Something about the flame or the fumes bothered it. I grabbed the fuel can and unscrewed the top, the sharp chemical smell mixing with the creature's rotting stench. I splashed kerosene on the floor between us and pulled out my matches. The creature paused, its shifting face focusing on what I was doing. I struck a match and dropped it. The flames leapt up with a whoosh. The creature made a high-pitched sound that hurt my ears and backed away. The swirling particles around it moved more frantically. For the first time, I felt like I had a chance. Then I saw something in the swirling dust that made my blood freeze. Tiny flecks of something pink, the same color as the dress my daughter was wearing the day of the fire. And there, a flash of the blue scarf my wife always wore. The truth hit me like a punch to the gut. This thing had been there the day my family died. The fire wasn't an accident. It was this creature making its first attempt to collect samples before moving to the isolated wilderness where fewer people would notice. Rage filled me like nothing I'd ever felt before. "You took them," I whispered. "You took my family." The creature's swirling dust formed shapes in the air, my wife's face, my daughter's smile. It was showing me they were still there, trapped inside it. I could join them if I just stepped through the flames. For a moment I wanted to. Maybe we could be together again, even inside this monster. Then I remembered something from my years of wilderness training. About 200 yards from the cabin was a natural gas pocket, a place where methane seeped up from under the ground. I'd marked it on my maps as dangerous. Now it might be my only weapon. I looked around the cabin. I had kerosene, matches, my heavy winter coat, and not much else. It would have to be enough. I remembered the notes. The creature was sensitive to certain chemicals when they burned. I soaked a blanket in kerosene, wrapped it around a chair leg to make a torch, and lit it. The creature pulled back from the flames, giving me space to move toward the door. My plan was simple but desperate. I needed to create a fire line that would force the creature toward the gas pocket. If I could ignite the gas while it was there, maybe the explosion would destroy it, or at least hurt it enough to drive it away. I ran outside with my makeshift torch, the creature following more slowly, cautious of the flame. I dragged the torch through the snow, leaving a trail of fire as the kerosene dripped and ignited. The wind was so strong it should have blown out the flames, but the fire burned in impossible patterns, forming a path that led toward the gas pocket. The creature followed, keeping its distance from the flames, but still coming after me. The swirling dust around it formed into faces again. My wife, my daughter, the missing researchers, all begging me to stop, to join them. "It won't hurt," my daughter's voice said from the swirling dust. "We can be together forever." I kept going, tears freezing on my face. The gas pocket was just ahead. I could smell it now, a faint rotten egg smell mixing with the kerosene and the creature's stench. I reached the spot and stopped. The creature loomed in front of me, its body glowing brighter as it prepared to take me. I had only seconds left. "You took everything from me," I said. "Now I'm taking something from you." I poured the rest of the kerosene over myself and threw the torch at my feet. The pain was incredible, but brief. The last thing I saw was the creature reaching for me with its tendril fingers as the flames raced toward the gas pocket. There was a flash of blue light, a sound like the sky tearing open, and then nothing. 6 months later, a search party found what was left of the cabin. They discovered my journals and final log entries warning about the creature. The official report said I'd died from exposure after suffering hallucinations brought on by isolation and extreme cold. They didn't believe the story in my journals. They didn't want to believe. But high up in the atmosphere, weather satellites recorded strange aurora patterns moving with purpose across the northern sky. Scientists at the National Weather Service detected an unknown type of particle spreading through the jet stream, organic matter mixed with something they couldn't identify. And in remote areas across the Arctic, people began to report strange winds carrying a terrible smell, and tall, thin figures walking where no human should be able to survive. The Windwalker wasn't gone. It had just changed, adapted. And now there were more of them, learning, studying, harvesting, waiting for the right moment to spread further south, toward the cities and the millions of people who had no idea what was coming for them on the carrion wind. My name is Natalie Ortiz. I've been a park ranger at Joshua Tree National Park for 3 months now. Today started like any other day patrolling the remote areas, but something feels different. The sun is beating down hard on my shoulders as I walk among the twisted Joshua trees. These ancient plants cast shadows that look like creatures from another world. I've always loved how they reach up to the sky with their crooked arms. I wipe the sweat from my forehead and take another sip from my water bottle. Out here the heat is no joke. It can kill you if you're not careful. As I look toward the horizon, I notice something weird. The heat waves rising from the ground are making shapes that don't seem random. They almost look like they're moving, with a purpose, like they're alive somehow. My boots crunch over the sandy ground as I walk. I've been noticing a lot of quartz crystals in this valley lately, more than usual. They catch the sunlight and shine with colors I've never seen before, blues and purples that don't make sense in this harsh sun. I pick one up and turn it over in my hand before dropping it back to the ground. That's when I see it again. The rock formation locals call the Witnesses. I've been studying it for weeks now. 10 large stones standing in a perfect circle about 50 yards across. Too perfect to be natural. When the sun hits them just right, their shadows all point to the exact center of the circle. My brain keeps telling me it's just a coincidence, but my gut says otherwise. Something else is off today. The wildlife is acting strange. I just passed a group of jackrabbits sitting completely still, all facing the rock circle. They didn't even run when I got close. And earlier, I saw a bunch of sidewinder rattlesnakes moving in the same S pattern, like they were following some signal I couldn't see. In all my years in desert parks, I've never seen animals act this way. The air feels charged too, like right before a lightning storm, making the tiny hairs on my arms stand up. But there's not a cloud in the sky, just that endless blue stretching forever. My radio crackles suddenly, making me jump. Through the static I hear voices, some in English, some in Spanish, and others in languages I don't recognize at all. I adjust the dial, but it doesn't help. This is Ranger Ortiz. Does anyone copy? I say into the radio. Nothing but more jumbled voices and static answers me. As I get closer to the stone circle, I notice something that stops me in my tracks. The sand around the rocks has formed patterns. Perfect geometric shapes that look like circuit boards or ancient writing. No way could Wine do this. I snap a few photos with my phone, trying to ignore the chill running down my back despite the heat. It's quiet, too quiet. Usually the desert is filled with sounds, the buzz of cicadas, the rustle of lizards moving through dry brush. But as I approach the center of the monolith circle, everything goes silent. Even my footsteps sound muffled, like I'm walking through a soundproof room instead of open desert. I look down at my shadow and freeze. It's not moving. With me, it's lagging behind by just a fraction of a second, like it's reluctant to follow. And it's not pointing in the right direction either. According to my shadow, the sun is coming from the central rock, not from the sky. I shake my head and blink hard, but nothing changes. Something is very wrong in this place. I've spent my whole life in deserts. I know how they should feel, sound, and behave. This isn't right. The whispered warnings of my Apache grandmother echo in my head. Some stones remember everything they've witnessed, and some want to show you what they've seen. I always thought those were just stories to keep kids from wandering too far. Now, standing here with my uncooperative shadow and the too silent air around me, I'm not so sure. I should radio this in. I should turn around and head back to my truck. Instead, I find myself walking toward the center of the circle, drawn by something I can't explain. Like the stones are calling to me. I wasn't always afraid of silence. There was a time when I searched for quiet places. That was before Yosemite, before the accident. I touched the small photo I keep in my shirt pocket, me and my twin sister. Elena, both of us in our ranger uniforms, arms around each other's shoulders, smiling at the camera. That was 3 months ago. Sometimes it feels like 3 years. We were on a routine climb with 2 other rangers, checking on some falcon nests on El Capitan. I still don't understand what went wrong. 1 minute we were secured to the rock face, and the next I was the only one left hanging. The others just fell. Elena's scream still wakes me up at night. Some of the rangers at Yosemite started whispering behind my back. How did she survive when everyone else fell? Why didn't she catch her sister? Something doesn't add up. I couldn't take their looks anymore. So when the job opened at Joshua Tree, I took it. Nobody here knows my story. I'm just the new ranger who keeps to herself. I pull out my voice recorder and press the red button. Day 27 at the witnesses site. Wildlife behaving strangely, radio malfunctioning, unusual patterns in sand formations. Dr. Kim, the department psychologist, suggested recording my thoughts as a way to process the grief. But lately, I've been using it to document the weird things happening in this part of the park. I take my sister's compass out of my pocket. It was a gift from our dad when we both joined the park service. The glass is cracked from the fall, but it still works. Well, it used to. The needle spins wildly for a few seconds before pointing directly at the center stone in the circle. I turn in a complete circle, but the needle doesn't move. It stays fixed on that stone like it's magnetic. My grandmother would have an explanation for all this. She raised me and Elena after our parents died. She was full Apache and never let us forget our connection to the desert. You were born with the desert in your blood, she used to say, tracing the spiral-shaped birthmark on my right arm. This mark means you can hear the stones speak. The old ones left messages in the rocks. Most people can't hear them anymore, but you can, Natalie. You can. I always smiled and nodded, but I never believed her. Stones don't talk. They're just rocks. At least that's what I always thought. I find myself rubbing my birthmark now. It feels warm to the touch, warmer than the rest of my skin. Probably. Just my imagination. My phone buzzes. It's a text from Marcus, the only friend I've made since coming here. Where are you? Been trying radio. Stay away from the witnesses after dark. Serious. Call me. Marcus Delgado is the senior ranger who trained me when I arrived. He's in his 50s, has worked here for 20 years, and knows every inch of this park. At first, I thought he was just being superstitious when he warned me about this place. His family has lived in this area for generations, and he grew up with stories about the witnesses. People go missing there, he told me once over coffee. They come back different, speaking words nobody understands. Or they don't come back at, oh, I should head back. The sun will be setting soon. But something keeps pulling me toward those stones. I've been camping nearby for the past 2 nights, breaking park rules. I've seen lights dancing around the stones after midnight. Heard whispers that sound like words in a language I've never heard before. Last night I woke up at exactly 3:33 a.m. The moonlight was hitting the central stone, making it glow. I swear I saw it move, just a little, like it was breathing. I recorded over an hour of audio, strange clicking sounds and what might be voices. I know I should tell someone what I've been doing, what I've seen, but they'd think I was crazy. Or worse, they'd connect it to what happened at Yosemite. They'd say the trauma broke something in my mind. Maybe they'd be right, but standing here now, watching my shadow reach toward the stones, when it should be, pointing the other way, feeling the strange electric buzz in the air, I know something real is happening, something that can't be explained by grief or trauma. The sun touches the mountains to the west. I should go, but instead, I find myself walking closer to the central stone, my hand outstretched. Just one more look, I whisper to myself. Then I'll go. The central stone is bigger up close, much bigger. It stands about 12 feet tall, dark gray with streaks of white quartz running through it like veins. As I get closer, I notice something I hadn't seen before, a narrow crack running from the ground up about 5 feet. It's just wide enough for me to peek inside. I pull out my flashlight and shine it into the darkness. The beam catches something etched into the inner wall. "What the?" I whisper, squeezing myself partly into the crack to get a better look. The stone walls inside are covered with drawings, petroglyphs. They show tall, stick-like figures with long arms and legs. But these aren't normal human shapes. Their bodies seem to be made of geometric patterns, and they're reaching out to smaller, normal human figures. In some drawings, the smaller figures are halfway absorbed into the larger ones. My heart beats faster. These look old, really old. How has nobody documented these before? I take out my phone and snap several pictures, the flash lighting up the narrow space in quick bursts. When I step back out into the fading daylight, I notice my recorder is still running. I've been recording this whole time. I hit stop, then play back the last few minutes. What I hear makes my skin crawl. Between my footsteps and breathing, there are other sounds. A low grinding noise, like stone rubbing against stone, and high-pitched chiming sounds that almost form a pattern. I never heard any of this with my own ears. I play it again, louder this time. The sounds have rhythm, almost like words. A beeping from my belt makes me jump. It's my radiation detector. We carry them for safety, as some old mines in the park area have dangerous levels. The detector is going crazy, showing radiation levels way above normal. I walk in a circle, watching the readings. The levels change as I move, creating a pattern of hotspots that seem to follow me. That's not how radiation works. It should be consistent in an area, not moving around. What is going on here? I mutter, trying to make sense of it. The sun dips below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert floor. I should leave right now, but first I need to call Marcus. He needs to see all this. No signal. Of course, I'll have to drive to higher ground to make a call. I start walking back to where I parked my Ranger truck, my mind spinning with questions about the petroglyphs and those strange sounds. That's when I see it. Marcus's green Jeep, parked about 100 yards from the stone circle. It wasn't. There earlier, I'm sure of it. "Marcus," I call out, jogging toward the vehicle. "Marcus, you here?" The Jeep is empty, driver's door hanging open. His equipment is scattered around like he left in a hurry. Binoculars, radio, water bottle. I pick up his notebook, the one he's always writing in. The pages are filled with the same symbols drawn over and over. Circles, spirals, and triangles arranged in patterns similar to what I just saw in the petroglyphs. On the last written page, in large shaky letters, "They are waking up." A cold feeling washes over me despite the lingering heat. Something's very wrong. I reach for my flashlight to check the area around the Jeep. It flickers once, twice, then goes dead. I shake it, unscrew the cap to check the batteries. They're brand new. I just changed them this morning. But they're completely drained. At the same moment, I notice something else. The quartz veins in the stones around me have started to glow, just a faint pulse at first, but getting stronger. They blink in a synchronized pattern, like they're communicating. "Marcus?" I yell again, my voice sounding small in the vast desert. I turn back toward the stone circle and freeze. The central monolith seems different. The crack I was just looking into seems wider now. And is it my imagination, or has the stone shifted position slightly? I reach out to touch the nearest rock, a smaller one about waist high. The surface feels unusually warm under my fingertips. As I pull my hand away, I notice something strange. A fine, sparkly dust clings to my skin. It catches what little light is left, making my fingers shimmer. When I try to wipe it off, it doesn't come off. Instead, it seems to spread up my wrist, leaving a thin, crystalline layer that catches the light. My skin underneath feels numb, like when your foot falls asleep. I should be panicking, But oddly, I feel calm. Too calm. Like part of my brain has shut down. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I call out, hoping Marcus might answer. That's when the strangest thing happens. I blink, and suddenly I'm standing 20 feet away from where I was. Just a second ago, I check my watch. 10 minutes have passed. 10 minutes I can't remember. My heart pounds in my chest. This isn't right. None of this is right. Something small catches my eye near one of the rocks. I kneel down to look closer, and my breath catches in my throat. It's a small desert lizard, half embedded in the stone. But it's not fossilized or dead. Its tiny heart is still beating, visible through a transparent section of rock. The stone looks like it flowed around the creature like water, then hardened. The sun has fully set now, and the temperature is dropping fast, much faster than normal. It should still be warm, but I can see my breath forming little clouds in front of my face. As it gets colder, the stones start to make noise, deep, hollow sounds, like someone blowing across the top of empty bottles, but much lower. The sounds form chords that make my chest vibrate. My radio crackles to life without me touching it. "Natalie," it's Marcus's voice, weak and distorted. "Below. They're below." The radio display flashes coordinates I've never seen before. They would put him somewhere beneath my feet, deeper than any known cave system in this area of the park. The stones are singing louder now, and in the growing darkness, I swear, the central monolith is starting to move. The moon rises over the desert, bright and full. Its light hits the central stone, and that's when everything changes. At first, I think my eyes are playing tricks on me. The stone surface begins to ripple, like water when you throw a pebble in a pond. But it's still hard, solid rock. I can hear it grinding and shifting. I should run. Every cell in my body is screaming at me to run. But I'm frozen in place, watching as the massive stone reshapes itself. It grows taller, stretching upward. Parts of it pull away from the main mass, forming what look like arms, too long and too many. The top part flattens, then bulges outward into a shape that reminds me of a head. In less than a minute, standing before me is something. Not human, not animal. A creature made of living stone, at least twice my height. Where a face should be, there's just a smooth, blank surface that ripples occasionally, forming temporary eyes or a mouth that disappear as quickly as they form. I back away slowly, careful, not to make any sudden movements. My foot kicks a small rock, sending it skittering across the ground. The sound seems impossibly loud in the quiet night. The stone creature's head turns toward me. It doesn't have eyes, but I can feel it watching me. It moves with a sound like grinding teeth, each movement leaving a trail of afterimages, like I'm seeing it in several places at once before it settles. "Marcus," I whisper, my voice shaking, because there, embedded in the creature's side, is something shiny, a park service badge. And next to it, Marcus's watch, the face cracked but still ticking. The thing that used to be a monolith takes a step toward me. I notice now that its body isn't just stone. There are crystals, fossils, and, oh God, what looks like human bones, partially sticking out from its surface. The creature raises one of its long arms. Light pulses across its surface in patterns, triangles, circles, spirals, the same symbols from Marcus's notebook. As the light flashes, the same patterns burn into my vision, like when you look at a bright light and then close your eyes. Somehow, I understand what it's trying to tell me. Not in words exactly, but in feelings and images that flood my mind. Old, we are old. Before humans, before trees, we sleep, we wait, we remember. Small rocks around me begin to rise from the ground, floating in the air around the creature like tiny moons. The sand swirls into shapes that look like words in a language I've never seen. I back away further. My foot hits something hard, another stone. But this one is different. It's shaped like a perfect sphere, about the size of a basketball. As I look around, I realize there are dozens of these spheres scattered around the area, half buried in sand. When the creature moves again, a nearby Joshua tree seems to freeze in place. Not just stops moving, it turns gray, then white. In seconds, the living tree transforms into stone, every needle and branch perfectly preserved. I've never seen anything like it. The creature is closer now. I can see that parts of it are transparent, showing impossible shapes inside. Spaces that seem bigger than the outside of its body. My phone, flashlight and radio all turn on at once, screens glowing brightly before quickly fading to black. The creature seems to absorb the energy, growing more solid and moving more quickly. That's when I see it clearly. Marcus's face, or part of it, pressed against the surface of the creature's chest, like he's trapped behind a window. His eyes are open, moving, looking at me. My blood turns to ice. He's alive in there. Conscious, I stumble backward, tripping over my own feet. The ground beneath me feels different, harder. I look down to see the sand around my boots turning to solid stone, creeping up slowly around the leather. The creature looms over me, its body shifting and rearranging. In my mind I hear, "Join us, remember with us, be stone, be forever." My grandmother's voice suddenly echoes in my memory. The stones remember everything they've witnessed, and they never forget. She wasn't telling stories, she was warning me. The creature reaches for me with its long, impossible arm. I try to move, but my boots are stuck, anchored to the ground by the spreading stone. The crystalline dust on my arm glows in response to the creature's presence. My birthmark burns like it's on fire. I realize with sudden clarity what these things are. They're not just stones that somehow came alive. They're ancient beings that preserve memories by absorbing living things, animals, people, their experiences and knowledge into their crystalline structure. And now, they want to absorb me too. The creature's hand is inches from my face when I remember something from my geology classes. Rapid temperature changes can fracture even the hardest stones. Heat expansion and cold contraction, basic science, I have. My emergency flares in my belt, and half a canteen of water. It's not much of a plan, but it's all I've got. My fingers fumble with the straps on my boots. If I can't move my feet, I can at least leave the boots behind. The stone is already halfway up the leather, creeping higher by the second. The creature's hand is so close, I can feel the cold radiating from it. In one quick motion, I grab a flare from my belt, strike it against the striker pad, and thrust. The blazing red light directly at the creature's arm. The reaction is immediate. Where the heat hits, the stone surface cracks with a sound like breaking glass. The creature pulls back, its body rippling with what I can only describe as pain. Pour water from my canteen onto the same spot while the stone is still hot. The rapid cooling makes the cracks spread wider. Pieces of the creature's arm break off and fall to the ground, turning to dust as they hit the sand. Now's my chance. I yank my feet free, leaving my boots behind, stuck in the stone. In my socks, I run, zigzagging between the other monoliths that haven't yet transformed. Behind me, I hear the grinding sound of the creature following, slower now, but still coming. I need somewhere to go. My truck is too far. The creature can control the stones and sand. Nowhere on the surface is safe. Then I remember Marcus's last message. Below. They're below. There must be a cave system beneath us. Maybe that's where he found something. Maybe that's where I can find answers, or at least a place to hide. As I run, I scan the ground for any opening, any sign of a way down. There, about 50 yards ahead, a dark gap between two flat rocks, just wide enough for a person to fit through. I sprint toward it, the sound of grinding stone getting closer. With the flare still burning in my hand, I slide feet first into the gap, feeling cool air rush up from below. It's a tight squeeze, but I make it through. I'm falling, sliding down a smooth stone surface. My flare casts wild red shadows on the Walls rushing past me. I land hard on sandy ground, the breath knocked out of me. Looking up, I can see the night sky through the crack I just came through, then a shadow as the creature passes over it. I'm in a cave, but not a natural one. The walls are too smooth, too regular, and there, lined up against the walls, are the most horrifying things I've ever seen. People, or what used to be people, turned to stone. Dozens of them. Some look decades old, wearing clothes from another time. Others seem more recent. All frozen in poses of terror, trying to run or shield themselves. My flare is dying, the light growing dimmer. In the fading red glow, I see a tunnel leading deeper. With no other choice, I follow it. The tunnel slopes downward, spiraling like a giant seashell. The walls are covered in the same symbols I saw on the creature. I run my fingers over them, and in my mind I hear whispers, fragments of thoughts from people long gone. The tunnel ends abruptly, opening into a massive underground chamber. My flare finally dies, leaving me in darkness. But there's light, coming from somewhere below, a strange silver-blue glow. I edge forward carefully until I can see the source. In the center of the chamber is a pool of something that looks like liquid mercury, glowing and shifting. Around it, in concentric circles, stand dozens more of the stone creatures in various stages of formation. Some are fully formed, like the one that chased me. Others are only partially transformed, still mostly resembling their original monolith shapes. The pool pulses with light, sending ripples across its surface. As I watch, mesmerized, images flash in my mind, thousands of memories, not my own. People, animals, places from different times, all preserved here in this collective mind. And that's when I understand. The pool is the true entity, the shared consciousness. The stone creatures are just its bodies, its way of moving through our world. Marcus, I whisper, and immediately I feel his presence in my mind. Natalie. They pulled me in. His voice sounds distant, like he's calling from the bottom of a deep well, but it's him. They're ancient, from before human. They sleep for centuries, wake to add new memories. How do I get you out? I ask, desperate. Can't. I'm part of them now, but not completely. Not yet. I hear a grinding sound from the tunnel behind me. The creature has followed me down. I'm trapped between it and the pool. I have 2 flares left and half a canteen of water. Not enough to fight all of these creatures. The one from above enters the chamber, its blank face rippling as it senses me. The ground shakes. Rocks fall from the ceiling. The creature is causing a cave-in, trying to trap me here. I have seconds to decide. The tunnel back is already half blocked with fallen stone. The only other way is the pool. As if reading my thoughts, the surface of the pool ripples, forming into a face, many faces blending together. In my mind I hear, join us, be remembered forever, or die alone, forgotten in the dark. I can feel Marcus fighting from within the pool, struggling to maintain his separate consciousness as the collective tries to absorb him completely. Run, Natalie. Get out. Tell someone. A large chunk of ceiling crashes down, missing me by inches. The way back is completely blocked now. The creature moves closer, herding me toward the pool. I light my second-to-last flare, the red light casting strange shadows across the chamber. The creature hesitates, wary of the heat. I look down at my arm, where the crystalline dust has spread, now covering most of my forearm. My birthmark glows through it, pulsing in time with the pool. My grandmother's words echo in my mind. You can hear the stones speak. Maybe she was right. Maybe I can do more than just hear them. I focus on the dust on my arm, on the feeling of the pool's consciousness brushing against my mind. Instead of fighting it, I let it in, just a little, just enough to understand, and suddenly I know what to do. These creatures need electrical energy to maintain their control over the stone. My equipment, Marcus's watch, they drained them for power. I look at the pool. the center of their consciousness. If I can disrupt it, maybe I can free Marcus, or at least stop them from taking me too. With the flare burning bright, I make my decision. I throw my radio with its battery pack as hard as I can into the pool. Then I strike my last flare and throw it in too. The effect is instant and catastrophic. The liquid surface sparks and bubbles violently. The creatures all freeze, their bodies cracking as the pool's control falters. The chamber shakes more violently than before. This whole place is going to collapse. I turn and run toward the tunnel, clawing at the fallen rocks, trying to make an opening big enough to squeeze through. Behind me, the pool roars and bubbles, sending flashes of light up the walls. Images flood my mind, thousands of years of memories being released all at once. It's too much. I feel myself slipping away under the onslaught. The last thing I remember is squeezing through a gap in the rocks, crawling up the tunnel as the world collapses behind me, and Marcus's voice suddenly clear. Remember for us, Natalie. Remember what you've seen. Then darkness. 6 months later, a search party moves through the desert of Joshua Tree National Park. They've been looking for Ranger Natalie Ortiz, missing since her last radio check-in. They find her backpack near a circle of weathered stones. Inside is her voice recorder. When they play it, they hear her final message. If you're hearing this, I might not have made it out. There's something ancient sleeping in the stones at the site called the Witnesses. They absorb living things, preserve their memories within their crystalline structure. They took Marcus. They almost took me. I've documented everything I could. Tell people to stay away from this place. The stones remember, and they want to remember us too. The search team leader shines his flashlight around the circle of stones. There's a new formation at the center that wasn't on any of their maps. Roughly human-shaped, with one arm outstretched. In the stone of its right arm, there's a spiral pattern that catches the light, shimmering with an inner glow. He steps closer, curious, drawn by something he can't explain. As his fingers brush the cool surface of the stone, he swears he hears a whisper, like someone trying to tell him something important. A warning. My name is Diane Hayes, and I've been a park ranger at Everglades National Park for 2 years now. What I'm about to tell you happened last summer, and sometimes I still can't believe it myself. It was a hot afternoon in July when everything started. The sun was just beginning to set, making the sky turn orange and pink through the trees. I was driving my airboat through the swamp, checking on some wildlife in a remote area. The motor was loud, churning up the dark water and making little green plants on the surface scatter away. The Everglades is usually full of noise. Birds calling, frogs croaking, insects buzzing. But as I got closer to an area we call the Red Mile, everything went quiet, dead quiet. The kind of quiet that makes the hair on your arms stand up. I slowed my boat down and looked around. The Red Mile wasn't supposed to be on my route that day, but something pulled me there. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe something else. This part of the park had been closed off for a while after a bunch of animals died there for no reason we could figure out. The first thing I noticed was the fog, thin wisps of red mist hanging over certain parts of the water. Red fog. That's not normal. Fog should be white or grey, and it should burn off in the heat, but this stuff stayed put, like it was stuck to the water. When sunlight hit it, the light seemed to disappear instead of shine through. The cypress trees around me looked wrong too. These are massive old trees that have been here for hundreds of years, but their bark was peeling off in perfect spiral patterns. I've never seen anything like it. Some of their branches twisted into shapes like cages, and inside a few of them I could see the bones of small animals somehow caught in the living wood. When I looked down at the water, I noticed it had a slight red tint to it. Not like dirt or algae, this was different. Small fish swam by in straight lines and perfect angles, like they were following invisible tracks. Fish don't swim like that. Then I saw something that made me blink a few times to make sure I wasn't seeing things. The water's surface had ripples that moved against the current, forming shapes that looked almost like letters or symbols before breaking apart again. The moss hanging from the trees seemed to reach down as animals passed beneath, then pull back, up when I looked directly at it. I told myself it was just the wind, but there wasn't any wind. I checked my GPS to mark my location, but the screen kept jumping around. 1 second it showed me in the right spot, and the next it showed me miles away in the ocean. I'm pretty sure I wasn't in the Atlantic Ocean. As it got darker, blue-green lights appeared in the water around my boat. They pulsed outward in perfect circles, like someone had dropped a stone in the water, except these circles didn't fade. They just kept expanding outward. That's when I spotted it. Half underwater and tilted to one side, a metal canoe. I recognized the University of Miami logo on the side. A research team from there had gone missing 3 weeks earlier. The metal. Parts of the canoe were eaten away in strange patterns, and the plastic parts looked like something had started to digest them. I should have radioed it in right away. I should have turned around and gotten help. But something kept me there, staring at the red water slowly rising around me. And that's when I heard it. My name, whispered so softly I almost thought I imagined it, coming from somewhere beneath. The Blackwater. I guess I should tell you a bit about myself. So you understand why I didn't just turn and run when most people would have. Before coming to work at the Everglades, I was in the Army Corps of Engineers for 12 years. My job was to fix wetlands and swamps that had been damaged during wars or by pollution. I learned how ecosystems work, how water flows, and how to spot when something isn't right in nature. I'm 38 now, and I've always felt most at home in places like this. Maybe because of what happened when I was a kid. When I was 9, an alligator attacked me while I was playing near the water at my aunt's house. It grabbed my left shoulder and neck. I still have the scars. Most kids would have grown up afraid of swamps after that, but it did the opposite for me. I became fascinated with these wild places and the creatures in them. That day at the Red Mile, I kept touching those scars like I always do when something feels off, and everything felt off. In the army, they trained us to listen, really listen. I can hear a snake moving through grass from 20 feet away, or tell the difference between an alligator swimming and a turtle coming up for air just by the sound. But in the Red Mile, there was nothing to hear. The silence felt like a physical thing pressing against my ears. My grandmother was Seminole, and she used to tell me stories about the Everglades. She said there were places where the water remembers, what it consumes. As a kid, I thought it was just a spooky story. Now I wasn't so sure. For the past year, I'd been writing down weird things I noticed in the park in a small notebook I kept in my pocket. Small changes in watercolor, animals acting strange, plants growing in unusual patterns. When I looked back through my notes last week, I realized that a lot of the strangest things were happening around the Red Mile. My mind kept going back to Marcus. Marcus Walsh was another ranger, and we'd been dating on and off for a while. 3 days ago, he went on a routine patrol through the Red Mile and never came back. The official report said he must have had a navigation error and gotten lost. But Marcus knew these swamps as well as I did. That explanation never made sense to me. There was something else too, something I hadn't told anyone. Since I was little, certain sounds have always appeared as colors in my mind. Doctors call it synesthesia. A bird's call might look blue to me, or an engine might look yellow. About a month ago, I started sensing something I'd never experienced before, a kind of red noise coming from the direction of the Red Mile, even when I was miles away. And the dreams. For weeks, I'd been dreaming that I was walking underwater in the swamp, breathing normally, while something ancient moved just out of sight, guiding me somewhere. My boss and the other rangers respect my opinion on unusual things in the park. I have a reputation for being level-headed and scientific, But lately, the park administrators had stopped returning my calls when I tried to report the strange patterns I was seeing. It was like they didn't want to know. As I floated there in my airboat, staring at the half-sunken canoe from the missing research team, I knew I had a choice to make. The smart thing would be to radio for backup and leave immediately. Instead, I cut the engine and reached for my sample collection kit. If something strange was happening here, I needed evidence that no one could ignore. The silence pressed in around me as I dipped a glass vial into the reddish water. That's when I noticed my hand was shaking. I pulled my airboat up to a small patch of dry land and tied it to a cypress knee sticking out of the mud. The research team must have set up camp somewhere nearby if their canoe was here. Maybe I could find some clue about what happened to them. After a few minutes of searching through the thick trees, I found what I was looking for. A small wooden platform built about 6 feet off the ground. Scientists use these observation blinds to watch wildlife without being seen. I climbed up the small ladder and pushed open the hatch. Inside, I found equipment still running on solar power. Water testing machines with screens showing readings that made no sense to me. The numbers were off the charts, showing chemicals that shouldn't exist in nature. One screen showed something labeled EM anomalies with a map of the Red Mile. There was a bright spot right in the middle, pulsing slightly. On a small table was a logbook. The last entry was from 3 weeks ago. Water samples show increasing complexity. Molecular structures self-organizing. Dr. Patel thinks we should leave, but we need more data. I took several samples of water from different spots and put them in my collection kit. Some in glass vials, some in plastic containers. I noticed right away that something was wrong. The water in 2 of the glass vials started to get hot, so hot that tiny cracks appeared in the glass. At the same time, the plastic containers looked like they were melting from the inside. I dumped them all out quickly and washed my hands in some clean water I had brought. The sun was getting lower, and I knew I needed to head back soon. I pulled out my map and compass to mark the location of the blind. That's when I realized I wasn't sure which way I had come from. I'm good at finding my way in the swamp. It's my job. But suddenly landmarks I had passed just minutes ago seemed to be in different places. A bent tree I remembered being on my right was now on my left. A patch of white flowers I had walked through was nowhere to be seen. I tried to stay calm and follow my footprints back, but even they seemed to disappear after a few yards. With each turn, I felt like I was going deeper into unfamiliar territory instead of back to my boat. The wildlife was getting stranger too. I spotted a turtle sunning itself on a log, but its shell was nearly see-through. I could make out its organs inside, but they were arranged all wrong, like someone had taken them out and put them back in a different order. A school of fish swam by in the water beside me. Some of them had tiny arm-like fins that they used to pull themselves along plants. A bright green frog clung to a tree trunk, its skin so thin I could see its blood moving through its body. But the blood wasn't red. It glowed with a faint blue-green light. I pulled out my radio to call for help, but instead of static, I heard voices coming through, fragments of conversations. Movement patterns in the substrate suggest that was a woman's voice I didn't recognize, probably one of the missing researchers. And a cognitive organization at a molecular level. Another voice, male this time. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. Diane, the water is aware. It's watching us. Don't let it... Marcus. That was Marcus's voice. But the transmission was from 3 days ago when he disappeared. How was I hearing it now? The radio went dead, and I shoved it back in my pocket. As I kept walking, I noticed the water was changing. In some spots, it became thick like syrup, making it hard to move. It seemed to pulse around my legs, like it had a heartbeat. Along the shoreline, I found perfect circles of dead plants, each about 3 feet across. In the center of each circle was a thin layer of red crystals. When I dripped some water onto one, the crystals dissolved, and the red liquid began to move on its own, flowing uphill against gravity. I looked down at my pants and boots and saw thin red lines spreading across the fabric, like veins growing before my eyes. They weren't just stains, they were growing, spreading in patterns that reminded me of blood vessels. I scraped some off with my knife and looked at it through the small magnifying glass I carried. They weren't any kind of plant or mold I'd ever seen. That's when I noticed something else. My watch showed it was 5:30, but the last time I remembered checking, it was 4:15. I had lost over an hour somehow. I had no memory of what I'd been doing during that time. With a shaking hand, I pulled out my notebook to write down what was happening. As I flipped through the pages, I found an entry from today that I had no memory of writing. The handwriting was mine, but the words weren't. The pattern beneath connects all. The liquid consciousness rises. It knows me now. My heart pounding, I stumbled forward and nearly fell over something half buried in the mud. It was a trail camera, the kind researchers used to take pictures of animals when no one's around. The memory card was still inside. I pulled out my small camera viewer and inserted the card. Most of the pictures showed normal swamp scenes, birds, alligators, deer coming to drink, but every few images, the picture would distort, showing massive shapes moving under the water's surface. They were huge, bigger than alligators, bigger than anything that should be in these swamps. But when I looked at the timestamps, they showed these things were there at the same time as the normal animals. Like they were invisible to the naked eye, but the camera could somehow see them. As I stared at the last image, I heard a sound that made me freeze. A soft splash behind me, then another. Something was coming out of the water. I turned around, slowly, and that's when I saw it for the first time. At first, I thought it was just red water splashing up from the swamp. But water doesn't move like that. Water doesn't reach. A thick red liquid rose up from the black water. It wasn't just coming up in one spot. It was rising in dozens of places around me, like fingers pushing up through the surface. The red substance shimmered in the fading light, somewhere between a liquid and a jelly. As I watched, frozen in place, these red fingers started to join together, flowing into each other until they formed something larger, something with shape and purpose. I've seen many strange things in my life, but nothing prepared me for what stood before me now. The thing, I started thinking of it as the aggregate in my mind, wasn't one creature, but seemed to be made of millions of tiny red organisms all moving together. Parts of it were solid enough to form arm-like tentacles that reached out and grabbed a fallen branch, while other parts turned to a red mist that drifted toward me. When I breathed in a bit of this mist by accident, my head spun and my vision blurred for a few seconds. The surface of the aggregate kept changing, glowing with shifting patterns of light. The patterns seemed deliberate, like it was trying to communicate. At the same time, the water around it vibrated in a way that created sounds, not quite words, but almost. Observe, connect, consume. The sounds weren't coming from any mouth. They were coming from the water itself, like the vibrations were forming words directly in my ear. I backed away slowly, but as I moved, I noticed something that made my stomach turn. Inside the red mass, suspended like insects in amber, were small animals, fish, frogs, a small turtle. They weren't dead. I could see them moving, their eyes blinking, fins twitching, but they weren't trying to escape. It was like they had become parts of the larger thing. Then I saw something that made me drop to my knees. Near the center of the aggregate was a human shape. No, several human shapes. Their outlines were blurry, but I could make out arms, legs, heads. One of them turned slowly in the red liquid, and I recognized the face. "Marcus," I whispered. His eyes were open. He saw me. His mouth moved like he was trying to scream, but no sound came out. Behind him were other faces I didn't recognize, probably the missing research team. I scrambled backward until my back hit a tree. "What are you?" I shouted at the thing. The aggregate didn't answer with words. Instead, it reached out, not toward me, but toward the water around me. The black swamp water began to flow unnaturally, circling around my feet, trying to push me toward the red mass. Nearby plants bent as if blown by wind, but there was no wind. They were all bending toward the aggregate, like it was controlling them. I pulled my machete from my belt and slashed at a red tentacle that had crept too close. The blade cut through it easily, separating a glob of the red substance that fell to the ground. But instead of lying there like normal liquid would, the separated piece began to move on its own, flowing across the mud back toward the main body, where it was reabsorbed. I realized then that cutting it apart wouldn't help. It would just reform. The aggregate seemed to be learning as it watched me. When I raised my machete again, the next tentacle it sent dodged my swing. When I backed away from the water's edge, it sent more of itself into the air as mist, trying to reach me that way. Then something happened that chilled me more than anything else. The red mass began to change shape dramatically. It pulled itself up, forming a human-like figure. As I watched in horror, the figure's features became clearer, more defined. It was making itself look like me. The red copy of me stepped forward, its movements becoming smoother and more natural with each step. Its face, my face, formed a smile that was just slightly wrong. "Diane." The voice sounded almost exactly like mine. Then the voice changed, becoming deeper, male. "Diane, it's me." It sounded exactly like Marcus now. "I'm still here. We're all still here. It's not what you think." The red figure held out a hand toward me. "It doesn't hurt. It's beautiful inside. We understand so much now. Join us." Even as part of me knew this was a trick, another part of me wanted to believe it. The thing was using Marcus's memories, his feelings for me, to try to get me to come closer. I felt a vibration at my hip. My forgotten radio was picking up a signal. But instead of voices, it was emitting a pattern of tones and static. The aggregate turned its head sharply toward the sound, then reached out with thin, hair-like strands toward my equipment. The radio sparked as the red filaments touched it, and the screen of my GPS lit up with scrolling numbers and symbols. It was trying to interface with my electronics. I realized then that this thing wasn't just some strange animal or plant. It was something entirely different, something that could think, learn, and adapt, something that could absorb not just bodies but minds. And it was growing. Even in the short time I'd been standing there, the main mass had expanded, creeping further up the shoreline. I had to get away. I had to warn someone. But as I turned to run, I found more of the red substance blocking my path, forming a half circle around me. Everywhere I looked, the red was spreading. The only path still open was toward a dilapidated wooden structure in the distance, an old hunting cabin built on stilts above the water. If I could get there, I might have a chance to think, to plan. I took a deep breath and ran, splashing through the swamp water that seemed to grab at my ankles, trying to trip me. Behind me, I heard a sound like rushing water as the aggregate surged after me. "You can't escape," called the thing with Marcus's voice. "The red mile is growing. Soon there will be nowhere else to go." I didn't look back. I just ran, my lungs burning, toward the cabin that seemed impossibly far away. As I ran, one thought kept repeating in my mind. What happens when the red mile becomes the red Everglades? I slammed the cabin door behind me and quickly shoved a heavy wooden chair under the handle. My chest hurt from running, and my clothes were soaked with swamp water and sweat. The cabin smelled musty and abandoned, with cobwebs in the corners, and a layer of dust on the small table and single bed. Leaning against the wall to catch my breath, I looked around for anything that might help me. The cabin was built on wooden stilts about 5 feet above the water. Good for keeping dry during floods, but now it just meant I was trapped if that thing surrounded the cabin. A faded calendar on the wall showed April 1993. This place had been abandoned for decades, but next to the calendar was a small bookshelf with a stack of notebooks bound with crumbling rubber bands. I grabbed the top notebook and wiped off the dust. The date on the cover read 1924, 1925. Someone had been recording observations here 100 years ago. As I flipped through the yellowed pages, my hands shaking, I found entries from a ranger or hunter who had seen something similar to what I was experiencing. April 18th, 1924. Red patches appearing in Sector 7 again. Administration says to ignore it, but the patches are larger this time. Fish dying where the red touches them. May 30th, 1924. Red area has doubled in size. Water samples show unusual properties. Sent samples to university but received no response. November 12th, 1924. First sighting of the red mass forming shapes today. Appeared to reach for a deer drinking at water's edge. Animal absorbed within minutes. February 3rd, 1925. Red area stopped expanding suddenly. Water returning to normal color. No sign of the masses. Perhaps it has died. The last entry was brief. March 15th, 1925. Red particles still detectable under microscope, but dormant. Army scientists arrived today, took all my samples, telling everyone the danger is past, but I don't believe it, it's just sleeping. I dropped the notebook and grabbed another, this one from 1952. Similar story. Red patches appearing, strange events, then dormancy. This thing had been here before. It had cycles, growing, then going dormant for decades before appearing again. Third notebook from the 1970s contained newspaper clippings about a government research station that had operated nearby. They were doing experiments with creating new medicines from swamp plants and animals. One article mentioned revolutionary self-replicating cellular therapy being developed there. That had to be it. They made something in their lab, something that escaped, or maybe they dumped it when it went wrong. And now, every few decades, when conditions were right, it woke up and started growing again. I looked out the dirty window at the water surrounding the cabin. There was a faint red tint spreading through it now. As I watched, small ripples moved against the current, forming those same symbol-like patterns I'd seen before. The cabin creaked as the water level started rising. This wasn't normal. It was like the tide coming in. But we're not near the ocean, and the Everglades doesn't have dramatic water level changes like this. The thing was controlling the water somehow, making it rise to reach me. I needed a plan. Cutting it didn't work. Fire? But how would I burn something that was mostly water? Think, Diane, think. Then I remembered my Corps of Engineers training. When invasive organisms get into waterways, we sometimes use salt to kill them. Fresh water. Creatures can't handle salt. Would that work on this thing? In the tiny kitchen area, I found an ancient container of salt, hard as a rock from humidity, but still usable. I also found some fishing supplies, including a tackle box with heavy weights, fishing line, and hooks. A splash outside made me jump. When I looked out the window again, I saw red tentacles rising from the water, feeling their way up the wooden stilts of the cabin. I didn't have much time. I grabbed a pad of paper and started drawing. I needed to understand what I was dealing with. Using my observations and what I'd read in the notebooks, I sketched the pattern of water channels through this section of the Everglades, marking the areas where I'd seen the red substance. When I connected the dots, I saw it. The spread wasn't random. It was forming a pattern that looked like brain cells, neural pathways. The water channels themselves were becoming like blood vessels for this thing, carrying its consciousness throughout the swamp. And the Red Mile was just the center of it, like the core of a brain. It was building itself a body out of the entire ecosystem. A loud crack from below, one of the support beams breaking as a thick red tentacle crushed it. The cabin tilted slightly. They were trying to bring the whole structure down into the water. Water began seeping through the floorboards, bringing wisps of red with it. The red streaks moved with purpose across the floor toward me. I opened my emergency pack and pulled out my road flares and the small container of fuel I kept for my airboat engine. It wasn't much, but it might buy me time. Another crack from below. The cabin tilted more dramatically now. Outside, the water had risen halfway up the stilts, and its surface was entirely red, glowing faintly in the gathering darkness. Through a gap in the floor, a column of red liquid shot upward, nearly hitting my face. I scrambled back as it formed into a humanoid shape. Not me this time, but Marcus. His features were clearer now, more detailed. "Diane, please," the thing said with perfect imitation of his voice. "You're only making this harder." As it spoke, more of the red substance oozed through cracks in the walls and floor surrounding me. The boards beneath my feet began to soften and dissolve. I struck a flare and threw it at the Marcus thing. It hit with a sizzle, and the creature recoiled, parts of it hardening and flaking off like dried clay. It worked, but only temporarily. The damaged areas were already being replaced by fresh red material flowing up from below. But the flare gave me an idea. I remembered something from my ecological survey maps. There was a natural gas pocket under this part of the swamp. Small, but definitely there. The old research facility had marked it as a hazard in their documents. My original plan had been to reach the old water control station about half a mile away. From there, I could potentially open channels to flood this area with salt water from the nearby estuary. But I'd never make it there now. I had one option left, and it was desperate. I took everything flammable I could find, old papers, wooden chairs, the bed sheets, and piled them in the center of the cabin. I poured my small container of fuel over them. Then I mixed the salt with some water to make a strong solution and filled my water bottle with it. The tentacles had reached the windows now, tapping against the glass like fingers. The Marcus figure watched me, its head tilted. "What are you doing, Diane?" it asked. "You can't stop me. I am everywhere the water flows." "Maybe," I said, backing toward the cabin door, "but not if I break you apart for long enough." I struck another flare and threw it on my pile of flammables. They caught immediately, flames leaping up to the ceiling. The dry old wood of the cabin caught quickly too. The Marcus figure's eyes widened. "This won't stop me." "No," I agreed, "but this might slow you down." I threw my salt water directly at it. Where the salty water hit, the red substance bubbled and steamed, losing cohesion. The figure's face contorted in what looked like pain. The fire was spreading fast. The cabin was fully engulfed now, and I could feel the heat pressing in. More importantly, the fire was spreading to the swamp vegetation around the cabin. If I was right about the gas pocket, the Marcus figure lunged at me, but its movements were slower now, less coordinated. The salt had disrupted it temporarily. I kicked open the door and ran out onto the small porch. Below me was nothing but red. Water churning angrily. Behind me the cabin was an inferno. I had nowhere to go but down. Taking a deep breath, I jumped, salt water bottle clutched to my chest. I hit the water hard and immediately felt the red substance trying to grab me, to pull me in and absorb me like it had done to Marcus and the others. I kicked hard, swimming away from the burning cabin with all my strength. Behind me, I heard a deep rumbling sound. The heat from the fire must have reached the gas pocket. This was going to be bigger than I expected. The explosion threw me forward through the water like a rag doll. For a moment, everything was heat and pressure and noise. Then silence. When I surfaced, gasping for air, the cabin was gone. In its place was a churning whirlpool of fire and steam. All around me, the red water was breaking apart, losing its cohesion in the extreme heat. I swam as hard as I could toward a cypress tree, pulling myself up onto a large root. Looking back, I saw the red mass trying to reform, tentacles reaching up from the water only to fall apart again as the heat and shock waves continued to disrupt it. For now, at least, I had created a gap in its network, a broken synapse in its growing brain. I didn't wait to see if it would recover. Using the stars to navigate, I started making my way toward the edge of the park, toward people and help and warnings that needed to be given. Behind me, the waters of the Red Mile churned and bubbled, already beginning to calm as the fires died down. In the fading light, I thought I saw new red tendrils beginning to creep out from the edges of the disruption, seeking to reconnect. I had won a battle. But the war was just beginning. 6 months have passed since that night in the Red Mile. I made it back to park headquarters just before dawn, covered in mud and cuts, babbling about red water and things that shouldn't exist. They sent me to the hospital, where doctors said I was suffering from heat exhaustion and possible hallucinations from drinking contaminated water. No one believed me. Not really. A search team found the remains of the burned cabin and evidence of some kind of explosion. They also found my airboat still tied where I had left it, but they didn't find any sign of a massive red entity or anything unusual in the water. The official report called it a swamp gas ignition incident. I went back to work after 2 weeks of mandatory leave. My boss suggested I stay away from the Red Mile area, saying it was still being monitored for ecological recovery. I didn't argue. I wasn't ready to go back there anyway, but I've been keeping track of things. Small things that most people wouldn't notice. Water samples I've secretly taken from different parts of the Everglades all show microscopic red particles that weren't there before. They're too small to see without a powerful microscope, but they're there, floating, waiting, spreading through the water system. 3 rangers have reported seeing patches of red fog in areas miles away from the Red Mile, always at dawn or dusk. Each time, park administration files the reports and does nothing. Last week, a tourist reported that their young daughter wandered off and was found staring at a small pool of water that moved by itself. When the father touched her shoulder, she didn't recognize him for almost an hour afterward. Yesterday, I noticed a thin red vein-like line on my wrist where swamp water splashed me during a routine patrol. It faded after I washed it with salt water, but for a brief moment, I swear I heard Marcus's voice in my head. I've been gathering evidence, keeping careful records. I sealed copies of my findings and the old notebooks from the cabin in waterproof containers and mailed them to scientists at 3 different universities. I also sent a complete report to the CDC, warning them about possible contamination spreading through the Florida water system. This morning, I received a strange call. A researcher at the CDC told me they had received my package, but when they opened it, the paper itself had thin red veins growing through it. The person who first touched the paper has been quarantined with unusual symptoms. They're flying me to Atlanta tomorrow to discuss what I know. As I pack my bags, I keep thinking about something I read in those old notebooks. It doesn't die, it waits. The Red Mile isn't just a place anymore. It's spreading, 1 drop of water at a time, moving through the streams and rivers, through the rainfall, through the very air we breathe. Sometimes at night, I dream I'm back in that swamp walking under the water. But now, instead of something ancient guiding me, I'm the one leading others. My skin has a reddish glow, and all around me are familiar faces. Marcus, the research team, and others I don't recognize. We're all moving together through the water, part of something larger, something growing. And when I wake up, my pillow is damp with water that wasn't there when I fell asleep. The clock is ticking. I don't know if I can stop what's coming, but I have to try, because I've seen what lives in the Red Mile, and it's seen me too.